if you had the power of mind control, how long do you think it would take for you to devolve into something that would be considered an aberration?
2 seconds.
What do you mean if?
I knew it, Adam.
Is that how you got so many people on this podcast?
For free, I might add. Like, nobody get paid.
He's gonna mind wipe us now, and so we're gonna forget that we're not getting paid. And like, oh, I get paid so much to do this.
Yeah, you guys, did you get your checks this week? Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, I'm clearly famous, right?
Obviously.
I just want to be famous enough that people will recognize my face if I go to a panel. That's all I want in life.
There you go.
What kind of panel? Like, hi, my name is Megan, and I've been on Alcoholic.
Yes.
Yeah. That count? Like, hey, we remember you from last week, so you're famous now.
That counts. That counts enough for me. Yeah. But no, it would take me like 3 seconds. Because I know I am one of those people that if I end up with any form of power, I will divulge into the ultimate villain as soon as I realize I have that ability. Absolutely.
Okay, I am definitely sending this to your management team so that they know.
Oh, they know. They absolutely already know.
I feel like the fact that Dan is not, bending under my will as we speak goes to show that I let him go from the podcast. So I had absolute power over someone and decided not to use it. So I must be a good guy, right?
I don't think one example sets
I need
the
this.
rule, but
now.
sure.
What about you, Kyle?
Well, I want to say that I would never go mad with power, but I mean, honestly, I think I would pretty quick.
Yeah,
right? Like,
but like what level of mad with power? Like, we're just talking telepathy, right? Like, you can read people's minds.
Yeah, well, more like
mind control. It was the mind control that got
mind
me.
control, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the general theme of the monsters that we're doing today. So, right? Like they can basically make slaves of other people. And I mean, I would be sitting on a golden throne pretty quick if I had the opportunity.
I'm not gonna lie, I would use my power only to skip lines. And that would be the thing that I do. Anything more than that is probably evil. So I would put that artificial boundary for myself so that as long as it's skipping a lineup or less, it's okay. But the moment that I turn to someone and say, hey, have an existential crisis because I don't like your face, now I'm evil, right? Like that's
the difference between you and I. That right there.
Megan, the day you become truly evil, and I don't mean just this like local warlord that you are now, but I mean like a tyrannical despot. The moment you become that, I'm sending Dan after you to bring you back down again because he will just hug it better.
Ugh. Oh my God.
Yeah. So there's your threat. That's going to keep you in line.
A hug from Dan. This is the ultimate threat.
I think that says more about Dan's hygiene than it does about Megan.
Yeah, I was going to say the ultimate threat is a hug from Dave for different reasons.
Oh. If Dave hugged me, I don't think I would know what to do. I think I would internally panic.
Yeah. Oh my God, am I dying? Do I have cancer and nobody told me?
You would get lost in the overwhelming scent of the woods and the warm, scratchy feeling of a beard.
That's fair. Oh my God.
Whenever you're ready to start this fucking nonsense, man.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the It's a Mimic podcast, where you never know what you're going to get.
Welcome to another It's a Mimic episode where we continue our conversation on Monsters in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I'm Megan, and with me today are Kyle and Adam, and this episode is called Aberrations, Pitching a Tentacle.
In this episode of the It's a Mimic podcast, this panel of Dungeon Masters is going to sit down and look at a handful of very gnarly aberrations that sit at the beginning of Tier 3, but have the potential to completely wreck an unaware party. So stay way back and do your best to avoid these horrifying creatures with a focus on tentacles, terror, and terrible attitudes.
But before we get started, I wanted to ask you guys, have you ever run into one of these in a campaign before? Let's grab dice.
Rolling. Yeah. Okay. Oh,
I got a 1.
I also got a 1.
Oh, I got a 13.
Megan's going first. Roll off, Kyle.
All right.
I got an 8.
I got a 7.
All right. So, Kyle, you're going last. Megan, you ever run into one of these?
Weirdly enough, aboleths seem to be very common in games that I play in. They seem to just turn up here, there, or everywhere, you know?
I have never used an aboleth with you guys. What? Are you telling me that you play other Dungeons and Dragons?
I was about to say, are you about to cry? Did I just set off some emotions?
Narrator!
You've played, it's like that whole relationship conversation of like, you've dated people before me?
Mhm.
How dare you? Yes, you are a current DM. There have been other DMs in my life. Sorry.
That's how I'm going to start referring to. I'm going to tell Mieke you are current fiance.
Please don't ever do that. Because you're going to tell her who told you to do that. And you're going to say it was Megan, and I will be dead.
You damn well know I'm going to tell her it was Dave.
Also, that sentence will quickly be followed by no longer fiance.
Yeah. You fucked up.
Yeah, you've run into a lot of aboleths, though?
Yeah, and like it's just like it's the use of the mind control and that kind of stuff makes it frustrating to use and be around. Like, yeah, like other than that, like I know we're gonna talk about Morkoth and like that kind of stuff today, and like I haven't really run into the big bad ones because I find that they tend to be more very large storyline driven. Whereas I found like aboleths I've seen just randomly or like how we've encountered but never actually dealt with kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yep.
But yeah.
I have actually made you guys fight a Balhannoth as well. Although you probably didn't recognize it because we were using a roper mini.
Yeah, I feel like in my mind when I was like looking into it, I was like, I feel like this sounds familiar, but I don't know it enough to say, yes, this has happened and occurred.
Yeah, you guys were level 13 and Dan's like, oh, it's a roper, but it's on the ceiling. And then it just fucked your world and it almost ate Lockie.
Fucked our world.
And when you guys killed it, it actually caved in the ceiling, and you guys made a whole bunch of rolls to get out of the way, and you rolled really well and managed to not get buried by the rubble or get eaten by this thing, but it was close. He was wrapped up in tentacles and kind of bludgeoned for a while.
Such a great time.
I really liked the Balhannoth. Of the 3 of them, that's my favorite one, just dropped in the middle of a campaign, just out of nowhere. Here's a random encounter that is going to fucking eat your horse.
Yeah, it's pretty great because you can like plug and play it in a lot of areas, right?
Yeah,
it doesn't need a whole lot of backstory. It doesn't need a whole lot of intro to it.
Yeah, it's a mouth with tentacles, and that's kind of its beautiful simplicity. Mm-hmm. And it's so much more than a roper is. Mm. Kyle, have you ever run into any of these?
I have both faced and used in Aboleth, but the other ones I haven't. But to be honest, I'm going to keep them in my back pocket for now because I do really like them. I also really like the Morkoth. It's just
yes. We had a question, like a mailbag question or something, like, oh god, 2.5 years ago, when I think Mordenkainen's first came out, and they're like, hey, how do you guys ever use a Morkoth? And Dan and I looked at each other like, a what?
Yeah.
We don't. What? Fuck no. And we moved on, and then like a week later after we recorded, I went, I'm curious. And that's why we're doing this episode, is because we had that question 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, it does feel very Space Jammery. You know what I mean? Like, it just feels like that's what but I mean, I digress.
When you need jammery in your space, you use a Morkoth.
The worst part is it is a tentacle monster, and I hate that.
They're all tentacle monsters, and that's what's so beautiful about this episode.
Oh my!
It's also why James is not on this episode, because it'd get bad quickly. It would get
Thanks for that grace, Adam.
That's strategically done.
Okay, well, before we get deeper into it, let's cut to an ad break.
We've previously covered quite a bit in our discussion on monsters in 5th edition. For all of those episodes and more, you can follow or subscribe at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and dozens of other podcast apps. And if you'd like to support us, you can donate through the website, check out our store, or join our Patreon and get access to other episodes and series. If you'd like to pay for some ad space on It's a Mimic, or just send a shout out to a friend, please reach out to us through our email and website that are listed in the show notes below.
Before we go any further, I just want to thank Acid Dialogue for becoming our most recent patron. I've enjoyed talking with you on Reddit, and it's great to have you in the Patreon Discord now. as for what else is going to be released this week, normally it would be time for another campaign builder, but there's been a scheduling snafu on our end, so we're going to have to bump it by a couple of weeks. But we're not going to leave all the patrons high and dry. First off, for brass tier and above, we've got another random episode of Legend Lore Online where I'm going to dig into the latest 3 D&D Beyond releases and whether or not they're worth your time and effort, and money for one of them. For copper tier and above though, dudes, don't worry, we haven't forgotten about you. We'll be releasing a bonus rant that Jeff and I just happened to catch on mic about the state of 5th edition right now. This is one of the few glimpses behind the scenes at how we really feel, and it's going to go largely unedited. And for everyone else, there will be a very special episode on our regular channels where I sit down with one of our platinum tier patrons and spend a couple of hours building a dungeon with him. But for now, let's get back to the episode.
We're going to be talking about 3 different aberrations. We all have our own little one that we're going to talk about today. So, I mean, we might as well get right into it. So let's roll some dice, find out who gets to go first.
Oh, yeah. 8.
14.
I got a 12. So
All
Adam,
right.
you are first. What do you got for us?
I am going first with the second monster from the monster manual, because it's in alphabetical order. So, I'm talking about Aboleths, and Aboleths are, in my opinion, the most underpowered, underutilized, and underrealized monsters. And they are, I think, what should be the big bad evil guys of Dungeons and Dragons. More so than a lich or even a dragon. I think the lore behind an Aboleth is so overwhelmingly cosmic and amazing that it belies the CR10 large creature that it is.
Absolutely.
This, and I've seen Aboleths that have been published in 5th edition, and it just feels underwhelming. They seem to be almost just dungeon denizens as opposed to tyrannical, monsters that are running their own empires. Every one of them should be like a god. But let me get into it about why, because I think that these guys are poised to be the perfect campaign villains, and I would absolutely love the last module of 5th edition to get published, the last adventure book, and it turns out that they are behind the Tomb of Annihilation and the Curse of Strahd. They're the ones that cursed Strahd. They're the ones that set up a Sararak. They're the ones that pissed off Oriel. They're the ones behind all of this shit, and they're bringing down the gods. I think that'd be fucking awesome. That's what we should have had. But anyway, here we are.
They're like the insects of the annoying little insects. Is that what you're basically referring to them as?
No. I think that they are okay, hold on. Let me get into it. These guys existed before the gods. They swam around in the primordial seas and the darkest bodies of water that exist before light was a thing. They used their psychic abilities, of which they have incredibly potent and powerful psychic abilities, to dominate the earliest mortals and become like gods. Anything with even a hint of intelligence, these things will change to become more like them and also to control them so that they have subjects that worship them. But then the gods showed up, and the gods are super fucking powerful, and they kicked the Aboleth's asses to the curb. But here's the cool thing. The Aboleths haven't forgotten because they have perfect, eternal, generational memories, and they scheme for eons at a time. So these are creatures that will remember everything that happened to them for their entire lives. They exist in deep, dark waters, oceanic abysses, and the elemental plane of water, and that seems to be where they originated from. When we say the primordial seas, it's the plane of water. And they still exist and act like gods in these places. And they require their subjects, any sort of aquatic creature or anything with an intelligence score, to worship and obey them. For them, there's 2 kinds of creatures, subjects and prey. And you don't want to be prey, because whenever an Aboleth eats another creature, it gains all of their memories and all of their experiences. And every time it kills and consumes someone, it becomes more powerful. These are master strategists that can pull on thousands of lifetimes of creatures to figure out the correct thing to do. In my head, these are potentially better schemers and plotters than even Asmodeus.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I was reading about them, I thought about a lot about mind flayers because they share a lot of the same characteristics. But I mean, I would almost make the argument that these guys are more powerful.
They absolutely are. Whereas the Mind Flayers seem to be more prolific, like there's just more of them, and they've got access to spaceships and laser beams and shit. Like, they are a civilization. Aboleths are not. The Aboleths don't seem to be a civilization. They seem to be separate from each other, all kind of connected like dragons. All the dragons still know that dragons are better than everyone else. They just kind of hate each other, right? Like a brass dragon will see a red dragon, like, I gotta fucking kill that guy. But if anybody else does, then, well, hold on a second. Who's killing dragons now? You should not be fucking doing that, right? And it's the same thing with Aboleths. There's a weird level of respect among them. And sometimes they will go to war amongst each other, but they don't team up. There's no big Aboleth race here. They are solitary, godlike creatures that kind of run their own shit. But here's the best part. Anytime that an Aboleth dies, it doesn't die. Its spirit just goes back to the plane of water and slowly starts to manifest a new body, and it'll be back within a year. The only other creatures that do that are fiends, but the fiends also come with the caveat that if you kill them on their home plane, they're dead. And I think Celestials work the same way. Aboleth doesn't say that. So even if you kill them in the plane of water, they'll be back. They will be back. And they will remember.
And they will remember. They will remember this unkindness. Do you think that they would be vindictive enough to like chase that person down?
Absolutely, but they're also going to be able to sit there with nothing to do, no body at all for months, sitting there playing this over and over again in their head, becoming not mad like a beholder, but strategic about it. I did notice that the left foot of the dwarf that walked in was being favored just a little bit. That must be a weak spot for me to attack in the future. It's that kind of shit that you can expect out of an Aboleth because they do have perfect memories. And as they go back to recall, they will almost like relive these moments over and over, trying to glean as much information as possible.
The scary thing about them too is that their numbers never lessen, right? Yeah. Because they are functionally immortal, there's just going to be more and more and more and more of them because they clearly do reproduce, right?
Yeah. Like they clearly do, but it's not like they're pairing up, right? Mm-hmm. So again, this is kind of like a dragon thing where there may be a new Aboleth every 1,000 years or so, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things to keep in mind though is that no matter, you can kill its body, you can go and upset its little kingdom in the Underdark or in the plane of water or whatever. You can go and fuck up its entire day, but you still didn't dethrone it from the king, the pinnacle of existence, the top of the food chain, the way that the gods did. So because these guys never die and they have perfect generational memories, they each have a personal vendetta against specific gods, and it never goes away. When it comes to their subjects, though, they're a little bit more devious, and this is one of the special little mind fuckeries that I like so much. We usually get out of like succubi, incubi, and hags, because they use their psychic abilities to tempt their subjects with desires and delusions of their own dreams coming true. If they do a psychic attack against you and it works, you become charmed. And this is actually a mechanic in the book. They have an enslave mechanic in the monster manual that says 3 times per day. It's a DC 14 wisdom save. And when you are charmed, you are under the Aboleth's control. So you do it at once. You don't get to take any reactions, which means you're like slowed down a little bit, but you can communicate telepathically with the Aboleth over any distance. And remember, when they die, they become a spirit in the plane of water. So just because they're dead doesn't mean that they lose their hold over you. The only way that you can get rid of this is to repeat the saving throw once per day, only if it's beyond 1 mile away, because if they're closer than that, they still have dominion over your mind. Or if you take damage, you get to reroll. So if an Aboleth gets killed and all of its subjects just like kind of swim away, they will come back and start tending to the kingdom again for the Aboleth to return. Now,
yeah, but I mean,
no, go ahead.
At the same time, I mean, it's a pretty easy thing to break at that point, right? Like you could stub your toe and then all of a sudden you can repeat the saving throw.
My thought process is if you have been getting everything that you want for your entire life and suddenly you wake up or you get an inkling that the world around you is actually dark and cold and wet and gross and it's not the paradise you've been living in, do you want to leave?
Oh, like a Matrix sort of
thing?
Red pill or blue pill.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
So I talked about the enslave mechanic for a moment. Let me talk about the actual breakdown of their stat block here. They got an AC of 17, which is good. Hit points are average for a CR 10, and again, the lore makes them sound like it should be a CR 25, but they come in as a CR 10. And I think the saving grace here is the fact that you can't really kill them; they will be back.
Yeah, but I think that's the point. Is that like CR? It's like, yes, you're soft and squishy. I can kill you, but like you're gonna come back eventually. So yeah.
So one of the things about them is they essentially look like a fish, but instead of a tail or fins, like they've got a row of back fins, but they just have a whole bunch of tentacles. They end in like 4 tentacles coming out the back half of it. And then they've got a big maw of teeth, not like an upper or lower jaw, but just like a circular maw of teeth. And above the maw are 3 eyes. And that's kind of how they move around, by swimming with their tentacles and by eating everything that they can. So that means that they are amphibious. They have a swim speed of 40 feet, but the tentacles also allow them to walk on land for 10 feet at a time. So I really like the idea of having to fight one of these guys and it stays in the water for the first half of the fight, and then that fucker gets out of the water, and now you're in trouble. As far as the actual numbers go, strength is above 20, intelligence is an 18, and so is charisma, which is what you expect out of something that's going to try to mind control, have good memories, or have a powerful memory, not fond memories. There's a difference.
I was going to say, when you say that they have good memories, I was like, I don't know if good is the right word.
I don't know, when they're enslaving people, that's a pretty good memory.
But like the amount of times you've probably been killed over your life by someone who hates you, like that's going to be a lot of memories that you just don't want to have.
Especially if it's the same bastard that's killed you like 17 times.
Could you imagine?
This motherfucker.
This bitch.
Yeah, their con and wisdom are above average. Their dex is just a little bit below average, which is pretty common for big monsters. They've got some decent saving throws with boosts to con, intelligence, and wisdom. And their history is a plus 12 because of course it is. And they've got a plus 10 to their perception. Dark vision for 120 feet because, yep, passive perception is 20. So it knows you're there. It speaks deep speech and telepathy out to 120 feet. Not common, which means that when it starts talking to you in your mind, you understand it, but it's speaking deep speech. So that's got to sound absolutely horrible. And in my head, deep speech is like wet tentacles writhing and massaging your brain.
And like echoey, you know what I mean? Like you hear it multiple times over and over again. You can't see, people can't see what my hands are doing, but it's like, I feel like my hands are making a squelching noise.
It's massaging.
Squelch,
it's a wet
my
massage
favorite of all words.
Squelch.
It's a wet massage of your gray matter.
Yeah. Okay. I think of it as like a whale call, but horrific. Like just nails on a chalkboard. Screaming through the ocean.
I think I like mixing the two of them, and like the whale call gives you the emotional intent behind it, and it's how they interact together. One is information and one is emotion. That'd be upsetting to hear. Mm-hmm. So here's my favorite thing about it is it has tentacles, but also something called probing telepathy. Megan's on mute and I'm taking a drink when I said that. It was pretty good. So if a creature communicates telepathically with the Aboleth learns the creature's greatest desires as long as the Aboleth can see the creature. So you don't want to be that close to it, right? Now, there are a couple of ways that it can communicate telepathically with you. The enslave thing is the best way to do it. It also has access to a gross thing called mucus cloud, which means that when it's underwater, the Aboleth is surrounded by what's called transformative mucus. A creature that touches the Aboleth or hits with a melee attack while it's within 15 feet of it has to make a DC 14 con save. If it fails, you become diseased for 1d4 hours. The diseased creature can breathe only underwater. So you get this underwater sickness that essentially closes your lungs and makes gills appear. They do get 3 tentacle attacks with their multi-attack. The tentacle attacks are pretty beefy. They got a reach of 10 feet, which is the best thing about them. Besides the fact that if the target is a creature, it has to succeed on a DC 14 Constitution saving throw or become diseased. This disease is different than the mucus because it has no effect for 1 minute, and it can be removed by any magic that cures diseases. But after a minute, your skin becomes translucent and slimy, and you can't regain hit points unless you're underwater. And it can be removed only by heal the spell or another disease curing spell of 6th level or higher. When the creature is outside of a body of water, it takes 1d12 acid damage every 10 minutes until moisture is applied to the skin before 10 minutes have passed. That's really gross, and it's really phenomenal, and that is how I would force my players to end up doing about 4 or 5 sessions of aquatic campaign.
Yeah, but also like trying to figure out the hard part would be figuring out that that's what's happening to your body, because I feel like as a DM you would describe what's happening to your body, like unable to breathe, like these things, and you wouldn't think that jumping in the water would be what helps.
Unless somebody jumped in the water and got into this mucus cloud and then could only breathe underwater.
Yeah.
Right, during the fight. And then the Aboleth is dispatched somehow, and everyone's sitting there going, well, shit, I'm having trouble breathing. What do we do? Right?
Yeah.
It also has a tail attack, but I don't know why you would ever use that outside of the tentacle attacks. And remember, you get to do that 3 times every round. Everybody in your party is going to be making these saves.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there's the enslave action that I talked about earlier. But I'm not done yet. There are also legendary actions.
Oh, baby.
They get 3. They can make a perception check as a legendary action to see if you are there. And remember, if they can see you and they can communicate telepathically with you, they know what your greatest desires are, and they can manipulate you. Tail swipe. So I guess that's why they gave us a tail attack to do as a legendary action. And then psychic drain, which costs 2 legendary actions. If you're charmed, you take 3d6 psychic damage, and it regains hit points equal to the damage that you took. So it just siphons off of you. But again, I'm not done yet because they get lair actions, and there's no reason why they wouldn't be in their lair where they are king of the castle. The first one is they cast Phantasmal Force. They don't need material components for this. Any number of creatures that can see it within 60 feet of it have this cast upon them. While maintaining concentration on this effect, the Aboleth can't take other lair actions. If a target succeeds on a saving throw, or if the effect ends for it, the target is immune to the Aboleth's Phantasmal Force lair action for the next day, although such a creature can choose to be affected if they want. So, Phantasmal Force, I'm going to look that up real quick here. You craft an illusion that takes root in the mind of a creature that you can see within range. The target must make an intelligence saving throw, and on a failed save, you can create a phantasmal object, creature, or other invisible phenomenon of your choice. Other visible phenomenon of your choice that is no larger than a 10-foot cube, and that is perceivable only to the target for the duration. So, this is your whole greatest desire illusion thing, right? To everyone within 60 feet that can see the Aboleth.
Yeah, would you impose disadvantage on the will save for the Phantasmal Force because that they know your greatest desire, so they know what you want to see?
Would I increase the wisdom save on it? I'm not sure that I would, just because of the way that it's written and the fact that this is hitting over and over and over again. I might raise the DC though.
Yeah, well, I was thinking like disadvantage, right? Because if you pass it, then you're immune for the next 24 hours.
Yeah, if you choose to be.
Yeah.
Right. And here's the interesting thing. Hold on, let me bring up the spell again because I want to make sure that I have this. The phantasm includes sound, temperature, and other stimuli, also evident only to the creature. They can use its action to examine the phantasm with an investigation check against a spell save DC, at which point they realize that the phantasm is an illusion and the spell ends. Of course, for the Aboleth, they can choose to not end that spell effect, right? And the other nasty thing about this is it's not actually the spell being cast. This is a spell-like effect. It is the Aboleth casts Phantasmal Force. So would I raise it? I mean, the mechanics are already built in there, and I think that's why it's a CR10. If I'm going to raise that at all or give disadvantage, then it becomes a CR11, CR12. I'm making it harder and harder for people to even take part in a fight, right?
Yeah, I guess. And the spell DC is going to be pretty high because I'm assuming they use intelligence.
Which is a +4 modifier. So
yeah.
Pools of water within 90 feet of the Aboleth. Here's the second layer action. They surge outward in a grasping tide. Any creature on the ground within 20 feet of such a pool have to make a DC 14 strength save or be pulled up to 20 feet into the water and knocked prone. And remember, if you touch it, there's that mucus cloud, and you got to make that save, right? To not be diseased. Water in the Aboleth's lair magically becomes a conduit for the creature's rage. They can target any number of creatures that they can see in such water within 90 feet. They've got to succeed on a DC 14 wisdom save or take 2d6 psychic damage. This is the only one that says right in it that you can't use this lair action again until you've used a different lair action. But I just always run all of my lair actions, never use the same one twice in a row anyway. So that's a lot going on for the Aboleth right now. And you can see that it being in its lair immediately makes it a CR12 creature. If it has minions around, and it fucking will, it's now a CR14 creature or higher. If it's coming back with revenge because it's faced you in the past and died, then it will have schemes. So now it's a CR16 creature. This is going to spiral out of control for these guys. But if you thought I was done, I'm not, because there's also regional effects because we got a layer. Underground surfaces within 1 mile of the Aboleth's lair are slimy and wet and are difficult terrain. Water sources within 1 mile of the lair are supernaturally fouled. Enemies of the Aboleth that drink such water vomit it within minutes. And the last one is, as an action, the Aboleth can create an illusory image of itself within 1 mile of the lair.
How fun.
The copy can appear at any location the Aboleth has seen before, or in any location a creature charmed by the Aboleth can currently see. Once created, the image lasts for as long as the Aboleth maintains concentration, as if concentrating on a spell. The Aboleth can sense, speak, and use telepathy from the image's position as if present in that position. If the image takes any damage, it disappears. If the Aboleth dies, the first two effects fade over the course of 3d10 days. So, that's Aboleths. Or so you would think, because I'm not done yet.
What the fuck, Adam?
We have more Aboleths to cover. First and foremost, in Tales from the Yawning Portal, they give us what's called reduced threat Aboleth. As far as I can tell, it is mechanically a little bit weaker, not based on the stats, but based on the attacks and the saves. And its hit points are lesser. It's still considered to be a CR10, and it does not have layer actions. It's just it does have its legendary, but not its layer action. But then Critical Role, Call of the Netherdeep, gave us 2 more kind of Aboleth-related creatures. One of them is the Aboleth Spawn. This is one of the creatures that has been a subject of the Aboleth for so long that they've been permanently changed. They have 3 eyes that have opened up on top of their head, like that move up their forehead, as well as their regular 2 eyes. Their entire skin has turned almost translucent white. Their legs have transformed into 4 tentacles, just like the Aboleth has. And they look like their skin has been pulled tight across their body and then is sagging a little bit. With slightly longer arms, they do look like creatures from deep within watery abyss. They absolutely 100% written in its stat block. They have to be obedient to the Aboleth Master. They cannot turn on it. They're also dependent upon water. They take the 1d12 acid damage every 10 minutes. They go without being outside of it. Other than that, they're your standard CR5 creature, which means they've got decent stats, no saves, but a pretty solid amount of hit points. They do have a multi-attack with a spear and 2 tentacles. The tentacles grapple. So yay, Megan's very happy. They also have something called Psychic Lash, which is when it doesn't give us any real information about this. It's a ranged spell attack, +7 to hit, 120 feet. 1 creature can be targeted by it, and it does 4d8 psychic damage. So you can imagine as you get closer to an Aboleth, you see 3 or 4 of these things skulking around in the distance. in the wet caves underground, and then suddenly you start to get hit with these psychic attacks, and getting any closer doesn't make it any better. But if you thought that I was done, there's still the one last thing, and they actually ramped up a special kind of Aboleth for the Critical Role setting specifically, called the Elixian Aboleth. I don't know the Critical lore rather, so I am going to just kind of guess that this is a creature with some sort of weird possession going on, because it's growing a second face off the side of its face. And it shares like this weird elongated mouth, but it's got a couple more eyes growing out of the side of its head. So it looks like an Aboleth, but it's really white and pale with like a whole bunch of like red, nasty growth coming out. I think that's the premise of Call of the Netherdeep, is things are getting corrupted, like underwater shit. This, however, is a CR 12. It doesn't have any of the lair or regional actions listed in the book. Sorry, the lair actions, the regional effects. It does still have the legendary actions for the tail swipe and the psychic drain, but it no longer has the ability to just do a perception check as a legendary action. But Enslave, instead of being 3 times a day, now recharges on a 4 to 6, and it's a bonus action. So you do it after your multi-attack.
That's pretty messed up.
Just for fun, just for fun.
Mechanically speaking, this whole shares the second face, might be possessed. There's weird corruption shit going on. None of that is actually like reflected whatsoever in the stat block. So it's just beefier and scarier and gets to do shit with the bonus action as well. So I love all of this, and I can just imagine that this would be absolutely fucking terrifying. Can you imagine how rageful an Aboleth having to share a mind with another creature would be?
Just angering.
Yeah. Bitter too, right?
So
like if I have to go through this, if I have to go through this, everybody's gonna deal with this too.
So that's what I have for Aboleths so far.
Are you done, Adam?
But wait, there's more.
For now. So yes, that's what we have in Aboleth. As a matter of fact, there's a lot more in previous editions if you want to dig into more lore, but we're focusing on 5th edition only. These guys, Aboleth did not get a revamp for Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse because they're in the Monster Manual, and the Monster Manual didn't get updated. It was just Volos and Mordenkainen. So the Aboleth is the way that it was presented in the Monster Manual when you first bought it. And it's probably one of the things that most people have flipped by because it's like second monster in there and gone, oh, neat. And then never thought about it again because we have devils and demons and dragons for 40 pages. And look at this cool ass section on giants and gnolls and goblins. But the Aboleth is there just being fucking awesome and waiting to be a campaign villain.
I hear that. Speaking of which, let's roll some dice and ask some questions about the Aboleth.
I got a 17.
15.
Big old 5.
Amazing.
Really well today.
All right, Adam, what's a good quest idea that you have for these folks?
I mean, it's built right into the lore. Don't lean away from it. My big thing for them would be an Aboleth is returning to the material plane. And it has enough knowledge, keeping in mind that it can show you your greatest desires. And all it has to do is touch you and make you... it's just a creature that it can see. The enslave thing is just a creature can see within 30 feet of it. So if it's in the dark or underwater and you're on the side of the ship, and let's say, I don't know, the astral sea, and one of these things is trying to make its way from the plane of water back to the material plane, it can see you fail a save, and suddenly your wife that you left behind at home, your husband, whatever it is standing on the ship of the deck going, I need your help. You have to come home, please. And that can derail a whole fucking campaign.
It's true.
That right there, the quest is then, okay, we're going to go do this as it attaches to the underbelly of your ship. And now you are transporting an Aboleth back to its home so it can get revenge on others. And the best thing is you and all of the other players around the table are going to get to see all the shit that they really wanted. Oh, you wanted a magical sword? Here's one. And then you have it. And there's no reason for you to say, oh, my magic sword doesn't exist. So you get all of these really cool things, and everybody gets this. And it's so cool and so powerful. And it's going to be, you're going to wake up one day and realize that all your shit is gone and you've been used by the bad guy the whole time. And now this is going to make your players pissed.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a thing to say that, I mean, you see it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's real, right? Like you could see this all-powerful Vorpal sword that could destroy a god in a single hit, but it doesn't mean it's going to be able to, right? This is still an illusion.
But it has the ability to cast phantasmal force. So once you're enslaved and it knows what you want and it can communicate telepathically with you, and you want to do its bidding, it is then going to use its action. It's a lair action, so I would say, it's going to make its lair on the bottom of your ship. How long does it take to make a lair?
A day.
Right? Like
if you're a magical being, you just like, it's basically, this is where I live now. Like
like you guys pull over on the side of an asteroid and the Aboleth manages to swim right up into the fucking side of your hull and just camp out for 3 days while you're off doing a quest, and now you got to deal with its layer actions. Phantasmal force is gonna give you the Vorpal sword. This is not real.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so I also don't think a layer would be able to move, right? Because at least in my mind's eye, a layer is created because their poison of their being is slowly leaking out into the environment around them, right? So if they are,
but it surrounds
constantly,
them. Like in my mind, it surrounds them, and it's like where they reside. So I feel like it could attach itself. And
well, okay, so there's your question: is a pirate ship environment or an object?
if it's inside the pirate ship, yes. If it's outside and it's like stuck to the bottom side of the hull, no, right? Because
so you don't think that a barnacle's home is the underside of a ship?
Well, I don't think those are the same things, right? That's not an equal comparison, right? Because I mean, a barnacle might pollute its environment over time, but I mean, if it's constantly moving through the ocean, its corruption is getting dissipated over all that area, right? Whereas opposed to, like, this is a terrifying and dark example, but if you're trying to poison a well, let's say, right?
Sure.
Drop a dead body in it, and then its corruption gets into all the water over time. But if it's a constantly moving stream of water, then that corruption is not going to have the same effect.
Yes, but like, I mean, poison is a good one that I feel like players and or other DMs can argue. But this one is just its mental capabilities of what it can do when it's in a specific area. It's not like it's not going to be able to mind control someone because it's only been there for 5 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, it's not an over the time thing. I feel like this one specifically, because it is mind control and it's an ability that they have in, like, for an area that they affect. Like, I just feel like it's a little bit easier to justify, but I feel like any DM can really decide what it wants to do. I love the idea that it attaches itself to like a ship, or like, let's say it's just all of a sudden like disguised itself and it's now in the hull of your ship and pretending to just be someone who's traveling with you, and it can still mind affect you right away, right? Like, I feel like its aura as an existing being has these mind control capabilities, and I like that a lot.
So I think that for the most part, Kyle, you're pretty right. When we look at the creatures that have lair actions, there's not a whole lot of them, and about half of them are dragons, right? Ancient and adult. On top of that, you get a whole lot of like CR20 plus fiends and some aberrations from Eberron, but you also get things like the Chiron, the Celestial, has lair actions. The Morenoloth, which is literally the boatman that takes you across the River Styx, has lair actions and regional effects, and his lair is his boat, and it's like barely bigger than a rowboat.
Yeah.
So I think that the idea of it like poisoning the area around you, we're talking about like its magical essence is flowing into the region and is corrupting it or imbuing it with its will, right? And that's kind of what the conversation we're having, not necessarily literal poison, right?
Yeah.
Poisoning the well is a good example because we don't really have magic in the real world. So, but the idea is that it takes a little bit of time to build up and become more potent. In my head, if you have an Aboleth, like hard stop. I don't need a qualifier on the end of that. If you have an Aboleth, that Aboleth has been around for eons. It knows all the shit. And if it decides that it's going to attach onto the bottom of your ship and it doesn't want to be found, it fucking will. Because it's built into the lore that these things are so ancient and so smart, and they have people that work for them. They have entire kingdoms. They have these massive schemes. So yeah, sure, they've got this little empire in like a dark, watery abyss. But those creatures, if some of them are drow that have gills, they're going to go out into the world and they're going to interact with other drow, and you'll still be able to manipulate societies around. These guys are. It's not just the little thing that they're doing here in their immediate vicinity. It's the fact that they probably control trade routes to avoid their waters or to lure people in, right? Mm-hmm. And they would have minions that can go out and make deals with other creatures that can then hire on mercenaries, because it has so much world and life experience that nothing is really outside of its grasp, and it will take eons to set up this plan, because this is what it needs to do to be able to wipe out the gods. It can't do it from down here. So with the high intelligence, that's why I say your Aboleth needs to be hyper intelligent, has to be a schemer. It has to be as intelligent at the very least as your high intelligence wizards. And that's why I like the idea of it being able to pretty much do anything. They're Batman. Batman's skill is, does he have enough time to come up with a solution, right? And then he fucking will. And that is his plot armor. For good or for ill, but that's what an Aboleth is. Do they have enough time? And the answer is yeah, they do. Right? Well, you don't fight an Aboleth one-on-one. You fight an Aboleth by wiping out its resources first, so that it cannot utilize its schemes against you. Yeah. And it probably becomes aware of you the first time you inadvertently disrupt its scheme. It's like, all right, fuck, that's the third time with these guys. That's it. Bring them in. We're gonna mind control them. They're ours now.
Okay. So, like, an example of what I was talking about is in the flavor text for regional effects, it says, if the Aboleth dies, the first two effects fade over the course of 3d10 days, right? So that's how long I imagine the effects to also take effect, right? But
I would say all of this is up to DM discretion. I feel like you can decide whatever the hell you want to do as a DM. It can either take 2 to 3 days based on how long it takes to dissipate. It can happen right away, or it could take 10 years. Like, I just feel like there is no rule, or there's no specific rule around it. So I just feel like any DM could just decide to do whatever they want to do.
Yeah, also, but Megan, we're trying to debate semantics here and your logic.
We're debating semantics on a question that should take 2 minutes, and you're taking 15.
Welcome to It's a Mimic, Megan. Have you ever been here before?
Yeah.
Look, honestly, I think that Megan's right. It's going to come down to DM discretion. Rules as written, there's nothing. Rules as intended, there's nothing. You have to extrapolate from the reverse of the, I don't know. Does it take 3d10 days to dissipate because the corpse is still there and it's still radiating magic out of it? Or does it take 3d10 days because that's how long an average, like that is the amount of corruption that a Aboleth on average puts into an area? Like, it infects it immediately, but it doesn't do 100% corruption until it's lived there for 150 years with a slow build. But then once it's gone, it dissipates quickly. Or is that just like a ripple effect, right? You throw a rock in the water, the rock is there fucking immediately, but it ripples for a little while, but it will eventually be calm again, right? So depending on how you want to look at it, I feel like you can make an argument any way you want. I love the idea of an Aboleth lair being whatever it wants to latch onto for 24 hours or so, because it's got the mucus. It is literally infecting the waters around it. And it has the ability to change other people. It has the ability to change other people physically to make it so they can only breathe water. It closes off your lungs. And not only closes them off, it makes it so you don't need them, right? It doesn't just suffocate you. It just makes them redundant. And it also creates an entire respiratory system magically, almost instantaneously. So, like, I feel like this is just something that it can fucking do. And the fact that, I'm going to say this too, it should be a spellcaster. I'm sorry, it's got high enough intelligence and a long-ass memory. And I feel like it was in previous editions. And I'm absolutely giving this thing spells.
Something. Yeah, something. It can't not have something. Yeah. But anyhoozle.
You were next, man. You got a quest?
I was going to lean into the reincarnation part, because where I have seen Aboleth in my past, like DM/character experience, was that there was always a character in someone's backstory that would constantly be following them. And it would be because there was a vendetta, and like their biggest rival in life was actually an Aboleth that was chasing them and following them, and we would fight them, and then we would think that we won, but suddenly they would appear at the end of the campaign or the end of the season multiple times. Or it would just be like a mini side quest thing where like they'd be like, yes, we have this thing hunting me and I can't necessarily kill it, it just haunts me, right? It ends up being like a haunting kind of thing. So, and it's one of those things where because it's a part of a character's backstory, they would have to decide whether or not they're actually going to act and do anything about it, kind of thing, right? So yeah.
when it talks about in the lore, it talks about how long it takes to reincarnate, how long it takes for a new body to show up, and it says days or months. Interestingly enough, it doesn't say weeks, which makes me think that like 1 to 30 days or 3d10 days, which is how long the Aboleth, that their influence disappears out of the regional effects. So like to Kyle's point a minute ago, like I'm swapping sides now. I'm like maybe the regional effects and layer effects and shit go away because it has manifested its body somewhere else.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I mean,
but
that's not going to be true for...
It's still technically sticking to your old thing because it follows itself, right? Like its regional effects follow itself. It's not that so like it dies, its regional effects like will dissipate over a period of time until it reincarnates somewhere else, and then that's where its regional effects are now. Like it's almost like it follows wherever it exists.
No, that's not going to be the case for a lot of the other stuff like Elder Brains and Beholders and fucking liches and stuff. Like, I mean, maybe liches. Let me pick something else. A Kraken. When they die, it still takes a certain amount of time for all the regional shit to go away again, and they don't reincarnate. So I'm kind of reverse engineering it to make it make sense for Aboleths, because why the fuck not? And they don't have rules for this shit. So
it's true. What about you, Kyle? What do you got for a quest?
Okay, so I really love the idea of them hating gods and trying to get revenge. So I'd like to do something where they basically took over a temple, maybe a really important one, that they got access to through an underground river, and have slowly enslaved all the priests inside, and are either forcing them to do horrible things and trying to get people to turn their back on whatever god it is, or using the priests to bring them more slaves, right? Like they set themselves up in the basement of this temple in an underground river, and these priests are like, come down here for some benediction, and then just to get slaved over again.
Oh my god! But hold on. To take it a step, I love that, Kyle. I absolutely love that. Imagine if they were going after an evil god. Imagine if they were going after Lolth, because Lolth was the specific god that kicked this specific Aboleth's ass way back when. And so the Aboleth is actually your fucking group patron. That's like, hey, can you guys go kill Lolth for me? I will give you all the shit that you want. But it communicates through the one Aboleth slime junkie that just loves how good it feels to be under the thrall of this Aboleth.
Drugs.
Right? It just comes out like, God, I wish I could see that imaginary shit again. I would love to get back into that. And don't tell me that people wouldn't do that. We're all fucking slaves to our fucking games on our phones. Come on now. We all love that invisible fake shit all around us.
Yeah, I was a nobody, but sorry,
what?
I was gonna say like I was a nobody before, but now I'm a player. Like I'm an important person.
Yep.
In the universe.
Yep. And like this one person is just like, yeah, I'm not only this, but when I go back to go see the Aboleth, he's gonna make me see my dead wife again, and I'm gonna go back to living my happy life. I know it's not real, but it doesn't need to be. I love her.
This is what I love. Yeah, this is the life I've chosen. Yeah.
So sad and heartbreaking, but also like really neat.
It's true. Speaking of heartbreaking, role-playing tips and tricks. Adam, what do you got?
I don't think an Aboleth ever uses its mouth for anything except consuming. So when it is speaking to you, while it does speak deep speech, I think it chooses to do it telepathically. And so it is just going to stare at you with unblinking, beady black eyes, one above the other. I think they were red in previous editions, but in the artwork now they're black. And this mouth that is just open, that it is just mouth breathing rotten fish smell out of it. And it's got 4 tentacles. How many tongues do you think this thing has to speak deep speech?
I'm gonna say it's like one tongue split 7 ways.
Yeah, I think so. But it's got the ability to roll R's in deep speech. So like to a mind flayer, it sounds vaguely Scottish, right?
I imagine that it's less the tongue and more the esophagus. Like it's like a whole bunch of segmented muscles that I can
Just
squeeze
guttural.
individually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think communicating with this thing, even when it's just like having a conversation, has got to be so disconcerting. It has to make your skin fucking crawl.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Just by talking to this. And I think that they would know enough to understand the different cultures of the world. They've got eons and eons to learn this shit. So they would know all of the right etiquette and cultural things to say to get you to do shit. They're hyper intelligent. They're hyper charismatic as well. And they've got high wisdom.
Yeah.
They're going to get you on their side, and they could probably do it without the mind control shit. And they'll probably let you know, I could do this with mind control, but I don't want to. We should be friends.
Yeah. I'm too tired and I don't want to. Today is a nap day, so I'm just going to treat you like a regular human being.
I don't think it's that. It's I'm doing you this
I've got a
favor.
headache.
Yeah. I've got a migraine.
I'm going to do you this favor. Now you do me a favor. I've decided not to mind control you. Can you go over there and kill this guy for me?
Yeah. I don't know. I like my thoughts on like if I was to role play one of these, I feel like they would be super hyper intelligent, know way too much, but they're hyper fixators in my mind. So like again, they're like if they were to be a revenge seeker on someone, they're obsessed with that, right? And there's just kind of just like I have all this wealth of information, but this next 6 months, this is what I'm going to focus on until the job is done.
I would just be really careful with that because you're going to kind of get into the beholder insanity, the beholder paranoia.
But it's like they know everything. Like if you had all-knowing knowledge from the beginning of time and constantly being like, I don't know, killed and or hunted and or like, I feel like you would bridge a gap into the crazy. Like you would become slightly paranoid. Like I can imagine there are Aboleths in this world that would be paranoid because they're like, all anybody wants to do is kill me because of the type of person that I am. Or the being that I was birthed and born to be. So I'm going to be a little bit topsy-turvy crazy.
But I don't think that they're that paranoid anymore because, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen to an immortal being? They get their shit taken away, they can't get it back again.
But
right?
how annoying would that be? Like, I would be annoyed by it.
I think the only thing they would fear is becoming slaves themselves, right? Because they've seen it time and time and time and time again, and they don't really have to fear death. So what else could they possibly fear? Like
being captured and put in a room where they can't kill themselves, like a padded room. Like
yeah, and just being stuck in a loop, right? And so they've seen the effects of all these people they've enslaved over generations.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta think too that they've got to be fucking jealous of the gods because I can get people to worship me, but I force it. You guys get people to worship you and they want to. What the fuck?
Yeah. I feel like they would just pretend to be a god at some point. Like your point, take over like a
well, that's their whole shtick. Is they acted as gods before the gods showed up, and they still have their own little kingdoms where they act like gods until someone comes and kills them and sends them back to square one again. It's
true.
like they're all trying to get back to the level of power that they had before, but the gods. And keep in mind, the gods created mortals, right? So all the mortals that they had enslaved before were like fish and seahorses and like mildly intelligent seaweed. And then these fucking bipedal bastards come out here with wrought iron and magic, and they kick my ass back to square one over and over. It's not just the gods that do it, the creations of the gods do it.
Yeah.
So I think there's like a real jealousy, a real anger, a seething anger. But I mean, how long can you be angry for before it just starts to make you mean? You're not angry. You're not enraged anymore. You're just mean.
Yeah.
That's what
well, I mean, they live forever. And so they constantly have to deal with that, right? Like they have perfect memory for all time. So it is a constant reminder that they are always the bridesmaids, never the bride.
True, but the other thing too is that, they've got perfect memories. We as humans remember the negative better than the positive. It's an evolutionary thing that we have to keep us alive longer. It makes more sense for us to remember the thing that poisoned us and made us sick to our stomachs than it is to remember the thing that tasted pretty good. Because the thing that tastes pretty good came and went and that's it. Didn't affect us, not going to affect our survivability. So we focus on the negative more than the positive. And Aboleth, though, doesn't have that evolutionary tick because they've never needed to. So they remember the good as well as the bad. So if they have been sitting around just in a pleasant little tentacle orgy for the last 4,000 years. What are they really upset about?
I mean, honestly, I kind of picture them being like old people sitting in front of their windows, watching children play on their lawn and be like, God damn kids.
Get off my lawn.
See, for me, I think the best...
I will call the police.
The best thing for me is because they don't age, like the best parallel is going to be vampires. The vampire that remembers your family because your great-grandfather did this thing 300 years ago. And they remember. But Aboleths take that to the nth degree because they are, like I say, they're immortal. It's not like they're old people because they don't look back on their heyday and say, I only have so much time left. No, they're going to live forever, right? I think that the present...
But they'll never achieve that level of dominance again, right? Like there is the past that will never reoccur, right? So they're always comparing the old days with the current days.
Yes.
But but you got to think about it from their perspective. It's not that they will never recapture that. They just aren't doing it now. This right now, these 10,000 years, this is the dark spot in my lifespan. I was a god before. I'm going to be a god again. I just got to figure out how to get there faster. I don't know. Aboleths are fucking fascinating.
I feel like you should have just done an episode on Aboleths at this point. Like,
I think we could have.
All right. Well, do you have anything else on role playing, Kyle, or we can move on to exploration and clues?
No, I think my main point was I think they would not have anything to fear except becoming slaves themselves.
Yeah.
I think that was the big point for me. So
I agree. That would be their one fear. Yeah. All right, Adam, exploration, clues. What you got?
Everything is wet.
Yeah. I was going to say everything is wet and everything is slimy.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm talking about my chair here right now. Because everything is wet.
Stop it, Adam. That's gross.
Yeah.
No one wants to hear about how wet it is where you are right now.
Yeah. We just lost at least 20 listeners.
Yeah, but I just got one super fan.
And it's an Aboleth. So these guys like me.
No, for exploration, these guys, even their minions need to be underwater, not just around water, not just wet, but submerged, right? Like that's the whole deal with them. So the exploration is going to be when shit gets weirdly mind controlling, when people start, like the clues are, people start to act strangely out of character, or they seem like absolutely everything is totally fine. Don't worry about it. It's all good. It's all fantastic because I have this one item, or I have the love of this one person, or I have this one thing this one place I can go to, and nobody else can see the thing. Nobody else has met the person. No one else can go to the place because it's a fantasy. But everyone is just kind of happy. Beware the coastal village of happy people.
Yeah. This was also where I would use the desires piece when you're doing the exploration. This is when your players are suddenly going to get visions of those wonderful things in their mind, or there's going to be that one player that saves, and all of a sudden everybody wants to do the same thing at one time. They're like, I'm sorry, we are on a quest. Why do we want to go to this town and do this thing? What's happening? Like that would be the moment of questioning where like half the group wants to do one thing very specific and half the other group is like, are you sure? Like
isn't that every D&D party ever?
But it's kind of like, it's a little bit different when like the focus completely shifts. And like, again, to Adam's point, your personality almost changes because your desire is something that would change your personality to like, it's what you want. So it's like, you're no longer putting on a strong upfront characteristic. Like it's almost like your role playing of your character is going to shift.
Okay.
But yeah, what about you,
I like
Kyle?
that. If I'm going off my previous example, I really liked the poisoned water effect. Like, I think that's a good clue that's not, I don't know, it's a little more subtle than the rest of them, you know?
Yeah.
And so if you went into like a temple, say, and the priests are using water for benediction on people, and your party's like, that doesn't smell right. Doesn't that seem weird to anybody else here? And then nobody kind of like reacts to it, right?
Everybody ends up blinking the three eyes on their forehead.
Yeah. Gross.
I just had a thought. It's kind of role playing, kind of exploration, because we were talking about with people around. Do you guys know about Needful Things, the Stephen King book?
No.
No.
The premise is that I think they just did a rip on it on Rick and Morty. The premise is that there's this mysterious mystical shopkeeper that moves into town. He opens up a little curio shop called Needful Things, and inside it is the thing that every person desires. You can have it for free, but I'll need you to do something for me later. And if you don't do it, I'll take it away. And I just was thinking with the Aboleth giving you everything you want, but there's nothing in any of the lore about the Aboleth being able to turn that off when they want. But could you imagine, I will reunite you with your dead wife and everything will be happy, or I'll give you your missing child back, but I can take them away.
Yeah.
And what that would do to people.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great motivator.
Yeah. And great motivator for another big bad evil guy, or like a bunch of evil people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's where the cultists come from. Protect, you know, the Aboleth so that we can maintain our positive lives and continue to keep the things we want to keep.
I think they would have fathomless warlocks follow them, definitely.
Yeah. Very true. Cool.
Are we into combat?
We're into combat, Adam.
Oh, lair stuff. Suck those bastards into the water and make everybody fight in the water.
Yeah. I was going to say, you're not fighting it. You're fighting its regional layer effects and its ability to keep you away from it and or pull you in, fuck up your life, and then run away. Like, it's not going to let you hit it, right?
Yeah.
Yep. I'm going to hit 3 of you. You're all going to be poisoned. I'm going to hit the 4th guy with my tail attack. And then on the next round, after his turn, I'm then going to... I'm going to hit that enslaved guy with my phantasmal force, and I'm going to totally fuck up everybody around. And like, this is battlefield control. You are fighting the environment with these guys, because I don't think they're ever going to leave their lair, which is why I think they make their lair wherever they go. They're going to be somewhere longer than a couple of days. They'll build a lair.
Yeah, I think if you're going to make an exception or think about what it really means to be a lair, this is one that you would think about that aspect, because it's not going to make itself vulnerable by leaving if it didn't have the ability to build a lair wherever it was going, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Okay, so I think this actually fits in great with the previous idea, right? Like exploration clues, is that the lair is always going to be on the underside of another environment, right? Like it's more of a parasitic thing than a standalone, right? Like with a dragon lair, it is the dragon's lair, right? And that is it. But for an Aboleth, it would be, you know, this thing is living in the sewers beneath a city, right? So the first thing you see is a city. You don't really know that it's also a layer on top of that.
No.
But in terms of combat, when I was using this thing, I made the mistake of doing combat outside of water, which was a terrible idea. Because like I didn't realize how quickly the 10-foot movement speed was going to become a burden on anything else, right? So if I'm going to use this in combat, it's going to be in the water, and it's also going to be a surprise in the water, right? So if I was going to do it, not like that, Megan.
Sorry.
Wrong kind of tentacles.
Yeah, but I think the best way I would use this encounter is, let's say your party is going through a series of caves, right? And they get to one pool of water and then they have to swim, right? Like underneath a rock wall to get to another pool of water to get to the next area in a cave system, right? I would have the party meet this Aboleth at the bottom of that depression where they're like swimming from one way to the other, and then they're caught between 2 spaces of land. And they can either try to go forward or back, but they're still going to be fighting to
Look at you splitting the party.
Hate it. Love it, but hate it.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, though. I would panic as a person just because I don't like being underwater, but that's fine.
Yeah, me too. Underwater scares the shit out of me.
Yeah.
I have legitimately 2 phobias in my life, and the ocean is one of them.
But is it like the deep sea kind of ocean, or is it like any ocean water you don't enjoy?
If I can't see the bottom, I don't know what can see me.
Thalassophobia is what that's called.
Yeah.
Yes, I am fully aware. My other one is trypophobia, which is the holes.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a fear of that. I just don't like looking at it.
Makes my skin crawl, and I get vomit reflex if I look at like a botfly infestation on someone's back. That's
okay. Gross. Nope.
Yeah. Okay.
Just gross.
Yeah. We don't need to talk about that one.
All right.
What do we need to talk about?
I'm going to talk about Morkoth. We're going to move on from Aboleth. Yeet.
You said yeet.
Yeet.
Back to the plane of water with you.
Yeah. Go drown yourself, Aboleth.
It just occurs to me that all of them today have layer actions.
Yep.
Neat.
Yeah. All of them have regional. Mine has regional and layer. I don't know if
Well, you get regional when you have a layer.
Yeah. Heyo.
I was really content to argue about Aboleth for the next hour and a half.
I know you were, and I'm like, I'm not doing this for another hour.
You ruined my fun.
I was like, when we're done, you and Cal can argue about this, and I'm going to log off because I'm going to go to bed. Oh, I'm sorry to ruin your dreams, but it's what I do as a person, so you should be unsurprised.
Is that what you do as a person? No, you do much more than that as a person.
I ruin dreams.
And you terrify, you torment Dan.
It's true.
You make Dave do ridiculous double takes in the middle of D&D. You encourage Casey to drink.
I encourage anyone to drink.
That's true, you do. I'm very concerned about Mieka coming up here.
Oh, I'm so excited.
You're
I need
another bad influence.
I know. I need another person to influence and be a terrible person too. And for.
And around and at and what else? What else? Yeah.
You know what? It's just how I roll. So cool. All right, let's talk Morkoth.
Let's.
All right, so visually, they look like your classic tentacle monster, but with an angry mouth, obviously. It's kind of like beakish, shall we say. But they're also covered in stuff. So if you're better than Terry and have seen the movie The Labyrinth, it reminds me of that garbage pit witch that tries to hand all the stuffed animal toys back to Sarah, and it's just covered in trash items, just like collector's items. But they think they're precious and special.
It's just like Pop Funkos as far as the eye can see.
Yeah, so just covered in all of those, but tightly bound by straps and like nets so that it holds it tight to its body. If
it was 40 years ago, it would be coin collections, but now it's Pop Funkos.
Pop Funkos, yeah.
A mobile hoarder.
Yes, It's a mobile hoarder is a very, very good way to describe it. But why are they covered in stuff, you ask? Well, I will get to that. First thing to note is that they are old as fuck, but also really cool. They're basically ancient and envious little fucks, kind of like medium-sized fucks that roam the plains, gathering and picking shit up to make the best and more complete feeling hoard they can.
Megan, we'll get there. They're large.
They're large. they're medium.
They're large.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're correct. Did they change from size from the olds?
I don't think so.
I swear to God. Anyways, I'll look it up later because I took notes from both books. So... Fine, they're large fucks. Large fucks given. But you see, it is kind of in their history that they are basically the spawn or rebirthing of a god of greed that fell years and years ago, that basically became a husk of a being that floated through space. And then basically one day collided with celestial, life birthing magic, and then a big boom happened, and that birthed many little tiny islands that were inhabitable. And on those islands, a small piece of the greed god was reborn into a tentacle monster from hell.
You're right. They were medium in Volos. They're large in
Mordekaiden's.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but they are large now because that is the new print, basically.
Yeah.
Anyways, so this Morkoth is a tentacle greed monster that likes to collect stuff and has a home to hoard it on. So not only does it hoard its stuff on its back, but it also hoards its stuff in its island, on its home, in its lair.
I know a couple people like that.
I know. I am not. I like to think that I'm a hoarder, but I'm not. I like an organized chaos hoarder because I collect very specific things. But yes, so not only that, but their little hoard islands are kind of described as being a place out of a dreamscape. So basically they are enchanted with a lot of mind fuckery magic. So if you visit one of these islands, you can basically say goodbye to anything that makes sense. Think of walking into the Feywild. That's kind of what you're walking into when you walk into one of these hoarders' homes. So here's the fun fucked up part. These islands are kind of also surrounded by protective magic, so they can exist anywhere and still be able to be inhabitable, including the Nine Hells. And they just float around sometimes they float around in patterns. So you'll see them float around and they'll arrive at the same place at the same time every year, or they just kind of stay where they want to stay, or they just kind of float.
This feels like Waterworld.
Very much so in my mind. Yeah. So they just kind of float around. Or they can stay. Again, they can anchor. In my mind, they can anchor the little island if they wanted to, or it could just like float through space too. If you wanted to play a Spelljammer game, I feel like these could float in space, you know? Like they could exist anywhere because it's its own like environment, own little environment that it creates for itself.
It's pretty fun. I really like that idea.
Yeah. So the Morkoth itself, the fun little thing to remember is that they're greedy little bastards that only want to acquire things that they don't have and will not give them up easily. They can be known to strike bargains, but remember that they're vindictive, so will most likely make it so that it favors themselves. But the thing to remember is that they can remember but they can actually track their items. So if you were to remove one of the items from its island or take one, it could follow you and it will know where you are. It knows exactly where all of its items are at all times, no matter what plane you're on, basically.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Not only that, but if you strike a deal and make you get to take one of its items, or let's say that you make an agreement with it that it's going to do something for you or you're going to do something for it, it will remember that forever. And if you break that promise, they will hunt you down or like wait until they get like that moment. And they will always, of course, remember, similar to like the Aboleth, it will always remember until it has either rectified the issue or completed the arrangement that it's made, like basically complete the contract.
They make me think of cosmic pawn shop dealers.
Yeah, pretty much. But much more vindictive and greedy, like to the umpteenth degree. So before I kind of get into the actual stat block of this thing, we'll talk about its layer effects, because it does have, of course, a layer, which I did speak to. But remember that the island is basically their entire home. But their layer then also has a series of tunnels and underground tubing, and they kind of dwell surrounded by its stuff in like a far off corner of the underground of its little dwelling. And then, of course, they have their layer actions, which is they can cast a spell within their layer action without actually taking up one of its spell slots. So they can use Darkness to spell magic or Misty Step. They can also use their Hypnotize capability, which is basically using its Hypnosis action ability, but instead of just being in a 30-foot cone, it just has to pick a spot within 120 feet. And then it's a DC 17 Wisdom save not to be charmed, which basically means that it has to move closer to... You would have to move closer to the Morkoth.
I have a question. Did I miss this? Are there layers underwater?
They can be.
They can.
Because they've got the swim speed and the telepathy and the dark vision, and then alter water is a thing that could... Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
You are getting... Those are its regional effects. Give me a minute, Adam.
If it's amphibious, the layer should be underwater just to make it harder for the party, right?
It is amphibious. So, yes. So basically, these tubings and tunnels are, again, they're underground. So in my mind, they could be underwater. But because it can exist within any plane, in my mind, it can either be like half underwater, half above water. Like it could be any of those things. But it does have regional effects that are very, very indicative that it would be underwater, or at least partially underwater. So again, so now we can go on to the regional effects, which are alter water, which basically means it can adjust any of the water within its layer only, though.
And now you're just copying me.
I know, right? But it can either make the water breathable. So if it wants you to come towards it, it will make the water breathable for you so that you as the party can travel through the water. But it can also change, of course, its opacity. So you can change whether it's murky or clear or what have you. So if it wants to trap you or, you know, I don't know, charm you into coming towards it, it has you go underwater where you are finding that it's breathable, all of a sudden make it unbreathable and change the opacity to murky, and you get lost in the tunnels and die. Just saying.
Yeah.
That's just a fun thing.
Yeah. Also, it can basically make it so air and water are the same thing, so that swimming speed also is a flying speed at the same time.
Sure. Why not? Again, as DMs, you can decide whatever you want to do in my mind.
Yeah.
It also has locate creatures and objects, which kind of speaks to the fact that it knows where its shit is at all times. But it can tell immediately if something or someone or new has arrived to its island. Like immediately will know that you're there. And then the aura feeling is that if you land on one of these islands, you are constantly being watched, even if you are not. You just get that feeling that you're being looked at, right? And then, of course, it has lost possessions. So for anyone who has been on the island for less than 1 year, every time you take a short or long rest, you make a DC 10 intelligence save or one of your items goes missing. It is actually going to be nearby, but if you have to make another DC 15 wisdom save to be able to find it. And if you don't within 1 hour, it actually becomes a part of the Morkoth's hoard, which then if you end up finding within their lair, you will find your items again. So what a great reward for your team, finding their own stuff.
That sucks. That sucks.
I think they really missed an opportunity by not calling that Finders Keepers.
Right? 100%. But I feel like, okay, Adam, I think you say that sucks, but I feel like you've done that to our group multiple times where you just take our stuff away and then return it later on.
I don't know what you mean.
And we're all super excited about it.
You guys started the campaign that way. I gave you guys magical item shopping lists to go get all your shit, and you guys spent like days saying, I want this, this is my cool thing. I'm gonna build my character around it. I'm like, okay, you wake up and all your shit's gone. You're like, fucking what?
And I'm pretty sure so many episodes just to get our original shit back. And then like to the point where I forgot what I had. Like that's how long it took to get our shit
level 2 when you got your shit back.
To this day, I think we're now on like episode 15. I used my magical item once because I'm like, I have that. Anyway.
Well, it's not my fault you don't look at your character sheet.
It's very true. Items, fuck that.
I'm a monk. I use my fists. Yeah.
I punch and I hit shit. But as the last regional effect is the supernatural lure, which is all entrances of the lair specifically are enchanted with a DC 15 wisdom save or be charmed to move closer towards it kind of thing. So I feel like their entire layer is built to pull you in. And the reason why I feel this is very characteristic of these things is it wants to collect. So not only does it just collect things, but it does collect creatures. It collects everything that it wants. So if you go into one of these islands or these layers, you're going to find creatures from all over that have ended up here and been charmed to stay, or like what have you. So you're going to find things and beings and maybe old adventurers that just got stuck here because they're constantly being charmed into staying here.
It's kind of like Benicio del Toro in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, it's very similar. Yeah, very much so. I like you. You're pretty. I'm going to keep you. I've never seen a creature like you before. I'm going to keep this, right?
Kyle,
like,
shut up. She's talking to me and I'm feeling better.
Adam, you're pretty.
That touches me so deeply and personally. I gotta go, guys.
Yeah, this is how you make Adam cry.
Yeah.
Be nice to him. All right, so let's kind of get into its stats. This is the stat block that can be found in the Mordenkainen's Presents the Monsters of the Universe. It's the updated version. You can also find an old build in the Volos book, but there are minimal differences, except, of course, the larger winch is removing the damage resistances. But also a couple of the spells are a little bit different, but not too different. So basically what you're looking at is the challenge rating of 11 for these guys. Within their lair, they do up to a challenge rating of 12, very similar to the previous one we spoke about. They have a natural armor class of 17, a bucket of hit points, and as you pointed out, they do have a 25 speed, but their swim speed is 50. So it would be really stupid for them not to build their lair underwater, or at least create it so that their water exists within their dwelling. They are above average in pretty much all of their stats, except for their intelligence is super high. Their intelligence is a +5. That is their spell modifier, so that would explain why it is where it is. Plus they're mindfuckery creatures, so that definitely makes sense. They have saving throws in Dex, Int, and Wisdom, with skills in Arcana, History. Obviously, History is +9. Not as good as the Aboleth, but still pretty smart. Their Perception, though, is +10. Again, speaks to the fact that they know when you're on their island, with a Stealth of +6. For their senses, they do have blind sight of 30 feet, dark vision of 120, and a passive perception of 20. So you can't sneak up on one of these things, obviously. So as you mentioned, they are amphibious. It basically means they can breathe air and water. So no matter what happens within their lair, they'll be able to breathe through it. So that's definitely, in my mind, a good combat play. Speaking of combat, they do have a multi-attack where they can do 2 bites or use their tentacles, obviously. I don't feel like there's going to be a lot of opportunity for them to use their bite. I feel like they're going to swap you with their tentacles a lot, and then again use their mind kerfuckery because they are spellcasters.
So they're gonna what us with their tentacles?
Swap.
Okay, that's what I thought you said. All right.
Swap. Do you want me to say it one more time for you?
Yes, please.
Swap.
Thank you.
Don't. This is a children's show.
Is it?
No, I hope not.
I didn't sign up for that. But again, they are spellcasters, so they do have the ability to cast the following spells without any spell components. It's going to be Darkness, Dimension Door, Dispel Magic, Lightning Bolt, and sending. So again, a lot of good mindfuckery like spells. The lightning bolt one I find interesting because they are underwater and they don't have any resistances. So I can't imagine them lightning bolting themselves, but that's fine. And again, they do also have their hypnosis capability, which is a 30-foot cone of magical energy. That is a DC 17 wisdom save, or else become charmed to move in towards them. They do have a really cool thing called spell reflection, which basically means that if it has to make a saving throw against a spell or a spell attack, or if a spell attack misses, it can send that spell back to someone else. So it basically can choose another creature, and that includes the spellcaster themselves, and it's within 120 feet. So that's a pretty far distance in my mind. And then it forces you to do a spell saving throw or be hit by whatever spell, etc. So it basically just says, oh, I'm sorry, that spell that you're trying to hit me with, or that fireball that you threw into this room, great, eat it.
I say no.
Yeah. So I know you didn't ask how big the room was, but I also did not ask how big that tunnel was. So here you go, fireball. Awesome. So that is basically the Morkoth.
I love them.
I think they're great. I didn't know what it was until, we started like talking about this episode, but like I really enjoy them a lot because for my kerfuckery, like it just seems like a lot of fun. But let's get into it. Let's roll dice and we'll talk questions.
Okay.
I rolled a 9.
8.
Oh, 10.
Kyle, are you first?
Yeah, ding, 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 chicken winner.
I like how you're first on a 10, but you're welcome. All right, quest ideas. What are your thoughts for these?
Shut up. So I love how flexible these guys are and how just like banana crazy, right? Like they basically just have their own floating island that's traveling through the cosmos and all the planes, maybe at random, maybe they get to choose where they're going. First of all, I think they would make a great reoccurring NPC for any Spelljammer campaign, right? Like they just kind of appear. They could be like your floating store that just keeps coming back. But I think I likely use them for like a character-driven story arc, like someone or something important to a certain character is trapped on the island, and now your party has to figure out, first of all, how to find the Morkoth, right? And then also figure out how to get whatever it is they want back. Are they going to barter with a powerful artifact? Are they going to retrieve something for the Morkoth? Or are they going to maybe risk a breakout on its island?
It's a good heist episode.
Yeah, right? Or instead, maybe they need somebody who's on the island, who is the only person who knows how to defeat their current foe, right? Because in part of the flavor text, it was talking about there's some people on the island that could be from a lost civilization from like thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
That just became trapped there, and now all of a sudden they're the only people left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I like for my idea was going to be kind of along the same lines of like looking into the different beings that are on this planet. And again, I'm looking at my theme for this episode is very much backstories of your PCs. And one of the things that I thought of was that you were like Willow style. For those, again, if you're better than Terry and you've seen the movie Willow.
And the show.
And the show now, actually. Absolutely. You were now birthed from beings that exist on this little planet. And they knew that the Aboleth was going to be so obsessed with you because you were like birthed from like 2 different old civilizations that have now created this new creature.
You mean the Morkoth? You said the Aboleth.
Sorry, Morkoth. Sorry, you're correct.
Do you want to keep talking about Aboleth?
I'm done with Aboleth. You know that I'm done with Aboleth. But yeah, it's like you're now this new special weird breed of creature that was birthed, and like they set you off the island, like they found a way for you to escape. But because the Morkoth knows where all of its belongings are, it knows where you are at all times and will eventually find you.
Oh, I like that a lot.
Right? Like that's why it's again, side quest to someone's backstory. This Morkoth will eventually appear, or you end up accidentally on its island and you're like, your parents know who you are and they're like, oh my God, get off the fucking planet. Like, are you stupid? We risked our lives to save your life and you're here? Get off.
And the Morkoth is just like, oh, my collector's item is back.
It's back. My collector's item. Collection edition. What about you, Adam?
Okay, now bear with me because you're gonna be pissed here for a second.
Throw down.
So your party's hunting an Aboleth.
Yeah.
And as you're hunting the Aboleth, you are looking through all of these weird, wet caves on an island, and you think this is a great place to find it. And you pass by what looks like an opening, like a chiseled out cave opening. And you get all of your players to roll dice. I don't often, every once in a while, I'll just say, roll a d20, and they don't know what this roll is, but you make them all roll dice. They'll think that this is like a perception check, but it's actually a DC 15 wisdom saving throw against their regional effect, supernatural lure. And they have no idea because they think they're hunting an Aboleth. But in reality, there's a Morkoth that is living here that is in a parasitic relationship with the Aboleth. And the Aboleth lets it live because it's good to have a red herring out there, and they'll find this guy first and kill him. That's fine. But the Morkoth, every time the Aboleth enslaves somebody, makes an Aboleth spawn, they don't need their shit anymore. So the Morkoth, like every night, comes out like, all right, what did these guys leave behind? As you like your one big crazy item that's your heart's desire, you neglect everything else, and the Morkoth will swoop in and be like, mine. You can be obsessed with the thing that doesn't exist. I'm getting all of your shit. So this is on the outskirts of a village or of a small civilization that the Aboleth controls, and the Morkoth just has this weird little labyrinth. But the best part about it is your guys will go in and you just get them to keep rolling, but the rolls are nonsense because part of the supernatural lore is that they instinctively know the right way to go. So anybody that failed is going to start to just know the right way. Doesn't matter what they rolled. Go left, go right, go left. There's 6 different ways. You take the 4th one. The 3rd one has some fresh smell. And they think that they're coming up with this information on their own, but you're just giving them the information too fast for them to write it down until they come upon the Morkoth and realize, oh shit, I didn't realize I was heading towards this creature. And what is this creature? And how do we get out?
Mm-hmm. I like that a lot.
And it will tell you how. But first it wants your shit.
Yeah, I take its stuff.
Yeah. I will show you the way out. You will probably die down here like everybody else because it's a labyrinth.
Yeah.
Or we could fight, or you could just give me your shit.
Yeah, give me your stuff. And it's just like, well, I already have like 9 half elves. You can go, but like, I want your stuff. Like,
not a collector's item. You punish the players that wanted to throw your fucking world. They're like, oh, there's only elves, dwarves, and humans. And I'm like, I rolled up a Harengon. Fine. I've never seen a Harengon before. You're staying. Elves, you bore me. Fuck off.
You bore me. You basic.
Exactly.
And the poor bunny's just like,
guys.
And it convinces that, like, again, because they're charmed, so they'll just be convinced, be like, oh, okay, bye.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Speaking of which, roleplay ideas, Kyle.
Okay, so I think a Morkoth would be devious. I also think it would think more with its stomach than its greed, because I mean, in the flavor text, it talks a lot about like, oh, I'll trade my services for food slaves, right? So that's a big what's the word I'm looking for? A big determinant of how it's going to proceed, right? Like, I think you can bargain with its stomach more than anything else. I think if it's in a social situation, it is only going to care about what it gets in return for everything else. And it will betray you the second it suspects any sort of weakness in you.
Yeah. The fact that you're playing on the food part brings me to, and Dan would love this, but another Dragon Ball Z reference. Beerus is a god of destruction who has an obsession with food and will spare your life if you can provide him with food that is delicious. And his favorite foods come from Earth.
Megan.
So...
the chef beat really coming in handy.
Yeah, the chef beat.
Megan, this is about the 100th time you've brought it up. And I need to tell you that we're in Vancouver, Canada. It's pronounced Dragon Ball Z.
Oh, God, get the fuck out of here. No one likes that, Adam. But yeah, my ideas for roleplay would definitely be playing on its obsessive compulsive behavior, where it just gets super excited about new items and new things, right? So like if you end up on the island and you're surrounded by like your same kind, you know that you're probably not going to be wanted or taken over or what have you, but all of the magical items that you have on your being, it's going to want to take. And this is going to be an episode where one of your players loses their magical item and like it's going to be obsessed with it. And like if you even, I feel like it's almost like an item where as soon as you are on the island, and this is again another conversation about layer effects and how things work, but once you're on that island, every item that belongs to you, now the Morkoth thinks that that item belongs to them because it's on the island. So its ability to track that item is going to be able, it can now. So even if you were to leave, it now knows where your magical sword is because at one point it did belong to it because you were on their island, right? And I feel like that would just play into its obsessive compulsive behavior being like, oh, that was here and now it's gone. I'm going to go find it. And it will reappear every once in a while.
I like that. Where it's, you really give a player a sort of emotional moment, especially if it's something, an item that's tied to their backstory, right? Where it's like, oh, what, like you're really asking like, what is more important here?
Yeah, I love. Or it's like, okay, you can have your herring gun bat your friend back, but I want your sword. Then it's like, okay, am I going to give up my ancestral sword or get my friend back?
Sword.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah, always sword. The answer is always get my ancestral sword back. Yeah, every time.
I can buy new friends. I can't buy new swords.
100%.
It doesn't have to be an ancestral sword. It just has to be sharp.
For me, absolutely, I agree. What about you, Adam? Role playing.
Okay, so I'm going to lean into the typically chaotic evil. This guy is going to be chaotic when he bargains, and I think he's going to bargain. Intelligence 20, right? Wisdom 15, charisma 13. Pretty decent bargainer. This is where you as a DM get. So he's going to know he's not going to get the ancestral sword off you, but you got a lot of other magic shit, including like potions and scrolls, and he could probably get that stuff as long as you make sure that you still keep your ancestral sword. And he'll devalue this. He'll offer to trade you other things. And with hypnosis, bringing you in closely with the locate creatures and objects, lost possession, supernatural lore, like there's a lot going on for this guy to kind of be in control of the situation and detect magic. So he'll know exactly what's magical and what isn't. You can't stop that. Mage hand, he can take it. And I like the idea of him throwing it all into a pit, but he just tosses it into magical darkness. So if your guys go in after it, they fall into a fucking pit.
Yeah. Pit of darkness.
But the thing that's really fucking nasty about him as far as the role-playing side goes is he's going to bargain with you. And if he doesn't get his way, I'd roll a d6 for this and like I'd roll like a d20, and on a 1 he attacks, and on a 18 plus he's just angry and doesn't cut you as good a deal. But there's a bunch of like different qualifying effects. He has dispel magic, and you have magic items you won't give him. And if he can't have them, neither can you. So now your magical +3 sword is a sword. No more magic. Fuck you.
Yeah. Emotional trauma.
Oh, absolutely.
Par for the course from what I expect from Adam.
Well, you have to keep in mind too that as a DM, you're going to set this up, enrage your players. They're going to be super pissed off, but then they're going to fight this thing because, of course, they will because they're D&D players. There's no negotiating. You're like, "Can I have your sword?" And they'll be like, "Fireball!" Right? So that's the negotiation your average D&D player does. And once they've killed the Morkoth, then they just go loot its shit and get a +4 sword. Right? Like, it will be okay when you target the things besides the ancestral items.
Yeah.
Right? You can take away that potion of healing is really now just a cherry Coke, right? But it's okay because there's 3 more potions of healing, 4 rooms away.
That's fair.
Yeah, I like that. Oh yeah, because it's so intelligent, right? It might lay out false positives, I guess.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. Yeah. All right, exploration and clues. Kyle.
I think it would be really fun to have to track down a Morkoth. So like you have to travel to all these exotic locales and find clues about where their little island is going to hit next, right? And so maybe you can predict the path, or maybe you can figure out where it's already come from. And it'd be like kind of a new spin on a chase sequence. And you could break this up the whole time with like filler quests at each location while still having this overarching quest to find this Morkoth.
Yeah. Now, I feel like if you were to end up on one of these islands, it's going to be weird that there are so many different types of creatures here. And there's like almost no doubles. It's like it's almost wants to collect one of everything kind of thing. And then like, oh, there's all these magical items everywhere. Like if your character was to use like whatever that spell is to feel magic, what is it? To feel magic abilities. Everybody fucking uses it.
Detect magic.
Detect magic. Like it would just be like overwhelming with how many items and things are surrounding you, right? Like that's going to be the exploration piece, and your team is going to be so excited to be here. And like, think of all these magical items we're going to get. Oh, this is magical item episode. But really it is the DM's like weird way of just being like, nah, I'm going to try and take your rare character or your rare items away from you, but good luck. And then if you do happen to escape the planet with an item that it owns, it's going to haunt you forever. And then that's going to be a thing in your DM back pocket to bring back every once in a while, right?
Oh my God. Okay, so building off what you said and what Adam said, your party gets onto this island. Well, it's floating through like the nether space between planes. And then your party tries to do the herder, I'm negotiating, and then murders this thing. And then the island starts to split apart. So there's all these magical items around you, and you can't get shit before it just
fizzles away. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like chaotic evil. So here's my exploration. As you're walking through, you realize that all of the ceilings in this lair are held up by very, very thin pillars. And every pillar, about 10 feet up in the air, has a very strong chain wrapped around it. And the chains all disappear into holes in the walls. And so when you go to talk to the Morkoth, he's sitting there, he's got one tentacle wrapped around 70 chains. And if he's gonna die, the last thing he does is just cave in the fucking roof.
Yeah, because like it goes back to that vindictive part of just like, if I can't have it, no one can. All of my items will be destroyed.
But I have a meta reason for this too. Like it's funny, it's neat, it's good as far as like the narrative goes. But my reasoning is I want to dangle a bunch of high-powered magic items in front of the players, and the only thing between them and these magic items is this one creature. Good or evil, they will fucking slay that creature and get those items. And now I've got a power creep issue in my game. So I have to take those items away. Maybe they can each get one, but each one of the items is under a glass dome in a pillar that's 40 feet away from the next item, right? And so you have enough time to get to one of these glass domes before the ceiling.
It's also like a teachable moment, right? Like, hey, yeah, sure, you can try this, but I mean, maybe also in the future, try to think outside the box.
Yeah.
Right. Don't make violence your first solution.
We will always try and teach our players not to use violence as the first solution, but it will always be the first solution. And we know that.
Yeah, a lot of the time.
Speaking of which, combat. Kyle.
So I think of the Morkoth as an ambush predator. It's smart. It's not going to go far away from its home turf. So you're never really going to find it outside of its own lair. And it will bargain in quote unquote good faith at first. But if it senses a shift in power dynamic or a growing hostility in the party, it is going to pull out all the stops, right? Like it is going to try to run. But I also think is going to like think with its stomach, right? Like it likes to eat, and that is its main priority. So I would just try to like hammer the party with hypnosis, hide in magical darkness, and then catch someone in the tentacles and the dimension door away to somewhere else. And then they could just eat the party one member at a time, right? Like, what is it? Separate and conquer.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, no, I feel like similar to the Aboleth, the Morkoth is going to use its layer to its advantage. Like how I mentioned right at the beginning, where the fact that it can change the way the water works within its tunnels, I think it would use to its advantage quite a bit. Because there have been times where like I've been in like dungeon diving and there's like a magical item at the bottom of a pool. And I feel like Adam's going to recognize this story in the sense where we had to figure out a way to get this magical item out of this pool of water.
Yep.
Like that whole process, right? And you're going to go down with like, you're going to dive in, your one character's going to go down and be like, oh man, I can breathe in this water. And then all of a sudden you can't, right? And don't get me wrong, like we've talked about the drowning mechanic and the fact that you can technically survive for quite some time. but then the water gets murky and then you can't see anything, right? It's trying to trap you and like get you closer to where it is. So you're going to swim towards where the clear water is, and you're going to eventually end up in its like cave dwellings, right? It's going to use its items as traps for people that it knows are going to be coming after its shit, right? So yeah. What about you, Adam?
Hella devious.
That's how I roll, man. That's how I roll.
Well, you want to get hella devious? Let me tell you what I'm going to do. Layer action. On initiative count 20, you do one of the following. Cast a spell. What spells? Darkness, Misty Step, or Dispel Magic. Every turn. Dispel Magic, the arcane focus. Dispel Magic, the cleric's warhammer. Like, I'm going to Dispel Magic the sorcerer.
Take its stuff.
That they just keels over dead, right? Like, Dispel Magic all of their shit. But you can do this as a layer action on initiative account 20, which means you can do this 10 times a minute, which means get a copy of all of the item lists from your players before the session starts, and then see how long that they're going to sit there wandering through the layer where this thing can see them, and maybe plunge them into darkness, or hit them with a lightning bolt, or get them lost in the tunnels. And then it's going to pop up, look at them, and roll initiative. He's going to cast Dispel Magic and then disappear into the water again. You're out of initiative. And now you don't have your druidic focus or your holy symbol.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to depower the party over and over and over again. If you're not going to give me your shit, then you don't get it either. And that is going to frustrate the shit out of them. But remember, these guys are going to keep their most prized possessions on their bodies, which means if they think that they're losing, if they think that Lightning Bolt and their tentacles are not going to get them out of trouble, they will cast darkness, retreat into the darkness, and while they're concentrating on darkness, cast Dimension Door and get the fuck out.
Yeah, they're just going to disappear somewhere.
Yeah, because they have all of the most important things with them already. And that's
which now includes your ancestral sword.
Yeah. But that's what this is about, because this becomes who's got the best items at the end of the day. The party wants what the Morkoth has. The Morkoth wants what the party has.
Ooh, it takes and steals away like that NPC that everybody loves that is like a random like Aarakocra or something like that. Yeah. It'll take that NPC because it doesn't have one Dimension Door out of there, and then your group can decide whether you go after or you continue on with the story, right?
Yeah, I did that in my Evil campaign. It was the last session we ever played. It was right before Christmas. And we were going to take 2 months off, and then the pandemic hit. We never came back. But the very last thing that happened was Santa Claus stole their beloved ogre.
It's true.
And never to be seen again.
Bye-bye.
He's still out there somewhere, probably making toys.
It's true. All right, well, that's the Morkoth. What do we have left? What are we talking about next?
Okay, so a Balhannoth is, to put it gently, a giant football with 6 tentacles and a mouth filled with jagged teeth, right? It is a mimic. It's an upgraded mimic, right? There's no real description of it in anything other than it is an oval shape with 6 tentacles and arms, or 6 tentacles and a mouth.
Well, it's more of a roper or a what are they called? The fucking stalagmites and stalactites, right? Like a mimic can be anything, but these guys can't be anything, right?
Yes and no. I mean, they can't change themselves, but they can change the world around them, right? To a much more powerful degree than a mimic ever could. So basically they can warp a terrain within 500 feet of them, or like they can warp a 500-foot square into anything they want. Like the terrain will change. So you could go from like mountains to a plains in this like one little area. They can also they can create objects as well. They don't have the same force as a real item, right? Like, so if they made an object that's gold, if a creature decides to investigate it, they'll notice that it's like gold plating, right? Or it'll just be like a piece of wood that has been carved and then painted gold. So they don't change themselves, but they hide everything around them. And then they can also turn invisible for up to 10 minutes at a time. So they're CR11 creatures, originally hailing from the Shadowfell. They like to make layers that are close to populated areas and or along well-traveled roads so that they can snag occasional unsuspecting victims. They use their telepathy along the lines of the Aboleth, to find their quarry's greatest desires, right? So if their target is really wants to find a safe place to rest, or a temple devoted to their god, or anything along those lines, if they are within 1 mile of the Balhannoth can sense it, and then can warp the area around themselves to match that ideal. Their favorite food tends to be victims' fears and hopelessness.
Sorry. Their favorite food is your hopes and dreams.
Yeah, basically.
So
right?
they're dungeon master then?
Yeah, actually, Adam, I think if someone made a monster and they were like, "Oh, I gotta replicate Adam," they would come out with this one.
This is it. This is the one.
This is the one.
Because of the big ass tentacle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's one reason. But
it's the mandibles. Adam is unimpressed.
But
no, sorry, I was trying to find a joke to have womandibles, and I'm like, what would they be?
Femandibles?
Yeah. Would they be bigger or smaller? I feel like they'd be bigger because everything in nature, the female's bigger.
It's true. Girl sharks be crazy.
Yeah.
Anglerfish too.
I was thinking insects, like the queen, the ant, like compared to a worker ant. Holy shit!
Hey man,
and then humans got it fucking backwards by just like genetics for no stupid fucking reason.
It's true.
Yeah.
Anyways, continue.
Anyways,
Kyle.
Where was I? Oh yeah, okay. So their favorite food is fear and hopelessness. So what they'll do is they'll basically find someone who is desperate for something and go, "Hey, you should come on over here." And then this person walks over and they're like, "Oh my god, this is exactly what I wanted." And then all of a sudden this tentacled monster with giant teeth appears, grabs them, and then teleports away so that they can just slowly feed on their misery. It's really an awful creature, but I love them. So they are also sometimes brought to the material plane as well, to be used as guards in dungeons and the Underdark, often in the employ of drow, but also used by mind flayers, aboleths, grimlocks, and Koatoa. Though Koatoa actually raised them from birth and just kind of train them like guard dogs kind of thing.
That is fucking amazing, and I love everything about that.
Yeah. Also, I'm gonna be honest, these seem like a terrible creature to have as a guard. Like, could you imagine losing your keys and then this asshole gets into your brain and it'd be like, "I think you left them over here," and then
this asshole.
And then it like lures you over to this like secluded spot and then just
I love it.
I'm sorry, what was that noise?
No. I assume that's the sound most creatures make when eating something.
Nom nom.
No.
Just more aggressive.
Yeah, there's probably more squelching sounds in there too as well.
We do love a good squelch.
Anyways, for the stats, they have an AC of 17 from natural armor, 114 hit points, 25 feet of walking and climbing speed. They have a decently high strength, constitution, and wisdom, with con being the highest with a +4, while their dex, intelligence, and charisma are all below 10. The lowest being intelligence, which is a lowly -2. For skills and saving throws, they have a +8 to constitution and a +6 to perception, which seems a little weird to me, but I'll get into that in a little bit. They are immune to being blinded, which makes sense considering they have no eyes. They have 500 feet of blind sense, with them being blind beyond that, although they can detect creatures up to a mile away. They can understand deep speech and have telepathy also up to a mile. 2 legendary resistances, a multi-attack where they can make 2 tentacle attacks and 1 bite attack. The bite is +7 to hit, 5-foot reach, 3d10 +3 piercing damage, and then the tentacles are also a +7 to hit with a 10-foot reach, and they deal 2d6 +3 bludgeoning damage, while also grappling a creature and with a DC escape of 15. And then also each time a creature is hit with a tentacle, they move 5 feet closer to the Balhannoth. basically just trying to like shovel creatures into their mouths. If a creature is grappled, they can't use that one tentacle against another creature, but they have up to 4 tentacles that they can use. So they can grapple up to 4 different creatures at one time. They get 3 legendary actions where they can either bite a grappled creature, they can teleport itself along with any equipment it's wearing and any creature it has grappled up to 60 feet away, which it just warms my heart.
Don't
because
you
I
just
think
fucking love that? Don't you want to give that to anyone that can grapple?
nah, there isn't even a saving throw for it, right? It's just like, no, I want you over here now, right?
I have done that. I have added that to many, many creatures that can grapple and teleport, as Megan and Dan have learned the fucking hard way.
Yeah, this bitch. This asshole. We have learned. All right.
Hey, that's that little extra desperation to a rescue, right?
I agree. Absolutely.
So they can also vanish, where they can turn themselves invisible for up to 10 minutes or until it attacks. Then there's the layer actions, which are kind of different versions of the same thing. So they can choose to teleport one creature, like other than themselves, that is within 500 feet of themselves, to an unoccupied space within 60 feet of the Balhannoth. So you got that spellcaster hiding around on the outskirts and then thinks they're so safe. And then this guy's like, no, get over here, right? And just puts it right in front of them. They also can make themselves vanish to a single creature. So rather than just turning themselves invisible, they just make themselves invisible to a single creature, right? Also within also within 500 feet, and also with a DC 16 Wisdom saving throw. Although instead of 10 minutes, this effect lasts for 1 minute, or until the Balhannoth makes an attack against that creature, right? So you can still attack other creatures and be invisible to that person, which is like a really good thing if you have that, just the one fighter that does crazy damage every time, and you're like, I just need a little space.
I need a minute. I just need a breather. Yeah. Thanks. From your bullshit. Love it.
And then it also has warp terrain ability, where I was saying earlier, it gets a 500-foot square that it can remake into the image of whatever desire that it detects in another creature. These warping things aren't perfect reproductions, right? Like if a creature spends an action investigating something, they'll notice all the discrepancies, right? So if there's a bunch of books, like at the library, they'll find all the books have empty pages, or that there is, like gold-plated items or counterfeit. They also can't reproduce anything that is of a living material, so they can't recreate a creature. And they also can't have any moving parts. Oh, and nothing in this area can have any magical properties.
So it's very much an illusion. Like it's not like it's like an active operating existence of plane. Like it's like an illusion. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But what they are doing is they're trying to feed on a creature's desperation.
Yeah.
Right. So the idea is that, desperation and carefulness is not going to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
They also get 2 regional effects, which I think fit better as abilities than regional effects. So there's the sense desire. So they can read the strongest want of any humanoid within a mile, and learns if it's a place, like a safe haven, a good place to have a long rest, their own home, a temple, etc. And then also supernatural lure, where creatures within a mile get the feeling that whatever they want the most is like just around the corner kind of thing. And the closer they get to where the Balhannoth is, the stronger the feeling gets as well.
This is really similar to what the Morkoth had, right?
Yeah, but the Morkoth is like more along the lines of it just charms and makes it want to move towards it. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot less distance for the Morkoth as opposed to this one.
1 mile. Yeah.
1 mile out. But I do have a question for you guys. how would you deal with a supernatural lure without having a party get instantly suspicious, right? Like, how do you get each individual player to be like, hey, something you want is really close to you, and your character is going to want to go in that direction, but not have them be like, there's no way you're being this nice.
If the character is fooled by it being plausibly there, then the player needs to be fooled that it's plausibly there as well. So what I would do is I would have some sort of local legend that they hear about, like Fountain of Youth-ish kind of thing, where they need this one thing to go fight the big bad evil guy of the campaign. It's this one MacGuffin item that they desperately need, and someone is like, well, why don't you just go talk to the genie out in the woods, right? Or why don't you just go talk to the high-powered wizard that's out there? Go out into the woods and yell top of your lungs, and people say that they've seen it. The problem is sometimes they don't always come back, but the object is there, and sometimes they do see it, and the temptation is like you're drawn to it. And I would lay it all out ahead of time, like it's a real fucking thing, right? Because the locals would have some sort of knowledge about the existence of this in advance, right? They will have seen the thing that they want the most, and then have not gone after it and come back and been like, I thought it would be too good to be true, and now I regret it every day that I didn't go at least try, right? That kind of shit. And that is where I'd start to drop the bits and pieces for the players to think about. I'm going to do it before they see it.
Yeah. And I think the suspicion of it not being real is what makes them investigate it in the first place, right? They're not going to be like, oh, this could potentially be a thing, and then not try and go after it. Like, you can play on either side, like to Adam's point, of making it as real as possible, but making it as fake as possible is also an option, in the sense where, like, again, it's this can't be true. What the fuck is this? Like, I need to get to the bottom of what's trying to trick my mind. You know what I mean? So you can go either way in my mind.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
So these guys are pretty much unchanged. They originally got published in Tomb of Foes, and then republished in Monsters of the Multiverse. The only real change between the two is, besides cutting down on the lore, like they did for most other monsters, is they took 1d10 off the bite attack, and got rid of the ability to make 4 tentacle attacks instead of 2 tentacles and 1 bite.
Yeah.
So they cut down on, I don't know, I guess the variability, but not by much.
Mm-hmm.
I never know why they do that. Like, stop rebalancing your shit.
Yeah. We're going to change it as DMs anyways. Leave it the same.
Pretty much, right?
All right. Is that pretty much all you got?
That's all I got.
All right. Well, let's roll some
For
dice
now.
and chat out some stuff.
Dice.
13.
That is the second natural one I've rolled today.
Adam.
Oh, I'm coming number 2 with a 6.
Amazing. All right. I'll answer my own questions. Quest ideas. I like the fact that, like, Adam combined 2 of these in one. I'm going to combine 2 in these ones. I would like the idea that these would be the guardians of a Morkoth's lair. And it's one of their ways of being able to, like, pull you in via your desires. They have similar mental magic. They're going to collect them because they think they're cool. And then basically they will collect the ones. It can go either way. I feel like they would collect the PCs that they either find interesting to try and bring them into the lair if they're unfooled, or they're going to pick and pull away the ones that they don't want and let the ones that they do want to make it to the center of their lair. And then your team has to kind of decide whether or not they are going to go after their friends who were just taken and disappeared, or continue to be mindcrafuckery to make their way down into the lair of the Morkoth.
So these are the bouncers.
Yeah, they're the bouncers. They're the ones, and again, you can go either way. They either take the ones that it wants to, like, enslave into its community, or they'll take the ones away that, like, they're like, oh, this is trash, take that one away, and I'll let the ones that I want to keep come back into my lair, right?
Could you imagine if there was a agreement between an Aboleth, a Morkoth, and a Balhannoth to work together?
Oh my god. I would hate it, but as a player, I think this is really fucking confusing, but as a DM, I think it'd be a hell of a lot of fun to try and balance.
I also think it would be funny because you'd have this one big old island, right? And, like, it's relatively roundish, and there are different civilizations on all 3, three. You divide into thirds, and there's one civilization. Each one of them has a weirdly different story about the tentacle monster that offers you everything that you want.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Anyway,
who's next? Sorry.
That would be me.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think this one is kind of hard because I think for the most part it's going to greatly depend on what your party is like in terms of how it's going to appear. But I really like, I'm going to steal the idea out of a flavor text and just, I really want to fuck up an unaware party, right? So let's say your party is wandering the Underdark, and I don't think I would have a specific place that I would put it. I would wait until the party gets to a vulnerable enough space or condition, right, where they're going to be more likely to be lured somewhere. And so, they're making their way through the Underdark, and all of a sudden one of them spots a hole high up in the wall, and then they climb up there. They find like a desiccated corpse, in the middle of wrapping itself in a bandage. And there's like a fireplace right next to them, a bunch of corded wood ready to go. And it just looks like the ideal place to have a long rest. But if the party is smart, they would go, hey, doesn't seem kind of like a couple of these seem kind of strange. And you could kind of warn them with, if they inspect the corpse, they might notice that, the bones don't quite match up. Like there's a bunch of bones from a different creatures inside it. And then they might also be like, oh, why would this creature make a fire before wrapping themselves up? And then also question, why is there a bunch of corded wood from the surface in this hole in the Underdark?
I love that you're consuming that your group is going to assume or is going to question a nice place to take a long rest. Like they're just gonna be like, nice, we take a long rest.
I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Like,
that's fair.
You should always
good on you
that your party makes the best decision.
They do not. I like that you muted yourself, Kyle.
No, that was me. I clicked on the wrong person. That's the second time I've fucking done that.
You muted Kyle. He was going
Adam.
off. He was going off.
Yeah, but plan for the best, or no, hope for the best, plan for the worst.
Yeah, that's fair. What about you, Adam? Quest.
Okay, so imagine if an Aboleth and a Morkoth and a Balhannoth all worked together and had some sort of arrangement on an island. I had something else for this, and then I shut off my mouth too early, and I'm circling back and I like this better. I just think that it would be really neat to have a big, like, tier 3. There's not a whole lot of really fun shit in tier 3 without you digging into fiends, right? There's a lot of good fiends and dragon stuff in tier 3, but we've got this weird trifecta of like
tentacles.
Yeah, like aberrations that are so similar and yet not at all alike. And your party is going to have trouble going from one to the other But the fact that they're like CR10, CR11, and CR12, but each one of them can seriously pack a punch and fuck everything up is really interesting. And if they go after the Morkoth first, they might not have magic items to go after the other ones. If they go after the Aboleth first, they may be super paranoid coming after the other ones, right? So I don't know. For me, I'm combining the three of them. Megan, forget that you ever heard this because we're going to do this in our campaign.
God damn it, Adam.
Yeah.
I hate it when ideas that we come up with here together are ones that you're going to use against me.
I recently did that with the Sorrowsworn, and the look that you gave me was absolute disgust.
I was horrified. That's fine.
Remember
this kindness. I will be your DM one day.
60% of the party died. I don't know what you're complaining about.
My character survived. I'm okay.
Yeah. I mean, you lost your sidekick and the love of your life, but whatever, right?
You know?
Yeah.
What's a little emotional trauma for a D&D player, you know?
Okay, so Adam, I just want to add this because I thought it was an interesting addition to the lore. I couldn't find anything that backs it up in any sort of the mechanics, but
well, welcome to 5th Ed, where the lore and the mechanics are just like kind of distant cousins.
I tried to dig into like 4E and 3E as well, and I couldn't find anything. But one of the things it said was that they feed on magical energy, right? So when they're young, they're born through laying eggs, and it takes about 3 months between laying and hatching. And for all that time, the egg has to be close to a magical item or within a magical area of effect. And that's also when they grab something with their tentacles, it will kill all magical abilities. So if your player is wearing a cloak, right, with a magical ability, if they're grappled, they can't use that cloak. It's basically a dispel magic when they're grappled.
Oh my God. I know you say you can't really back this up in any of the writings legitimately anywhere, but could you imagine if these things were birthed in the lair of a Morkoth because there's so many fucking magical items there? That this is where they go to lay their eggs and where they go to be birthed.
You don't have a Balhannoth, you have the Balhannoth, and the Morkoth has collected it.
Yeah.
And is trying to make it as big and as powerful as possible to become this mythic level creature by feeding it the magic items. But I really like this one, so he doesn't get this one. So
it gets the extras, right?
Yeah.
Like,
so yeah, and this whole thing is happening, and the Aboleth is there to allow it to happen, because if this thing can get mythic level, we're gonna set it loose on a god, because this thing doesn't just feed off magic. You don't simply feed on something without consuming it. And the magic of the gods is directly connected to the weave. So if we have something that feeds on magic, what'll it do when it feeds on a god?
Oh, man.
oh my God.
There we go. I've tied it together. That's it.
we figured something out, guys. Like, this is amazing.
Yeah,
Like,
that's it. Cancel the rest of the podcast. We've done it.
yeah, we figured it out. We figured out the ultimate. Oh God.
And this is tier 3. Like, we could do this. And I mean, look at the art of the Balhannoth and tell me that you don't just pull off the tentacles and give it a carapace and it's a Tarask, right? Like, it's going to it's going to just beef itself up. I would reskin the Tarask to be like, I'd give this thing all the Tarask abilities as well as all of the Balhannoth abilities, with the mobility of the Tarask for my giant god killer monster at the end of a campaign.
This is amazing. I don't feel like we can top this.
Well, let's just go to an ad break then.
Yeah.
If you've been inspired by the conversation,
No, hold on. We have more to do, right?
We do, but in my mind, I'm like, I don't know if we're gonna get any better than what we just discovered. But like, we can try though. So that's all quest stuff.
Yeah.
So role play. When thinking about role play, was I first? I think I'm first. Am I
Yeah.
first?
You are first, yeah.
I'm last.
Phenomenal. I feel like this one of the three doesn't have a lot of role capabilities, because like, again, it's going to be similar to the Aboleth, where if it's going to speak through its telepathy and its mind brain. But like, I don't feel like it gives it and bodes it enough personality, other than it is just there to destroy and be a bodyguard, like, to me anyways, until it is like larger and more sentient, like we now have in like our new theory here. But it's, in my mind, it doesn't have a lot of lore and backstory in 5th edition that is usable to determine a personality. Like, you guys can prove me wrong though.
No, I 100% agree. I mean, it's got 6 intelligence, right? Like, it's not a very subtle creature, right?
Yeah.
It is a walking stomach, and you're not even going to have the chance to enter into any sort of conversation before it attacks, right? Like, it's going to stay invisible until it fucking hitting you with a tentacle and trying to draw you into its mouth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's my theories too.
What else has an intelligence of 6? An ape, a displacer beast, a dolphin, a gargoyle, minotaurs, the monster, not the playable race.
Fair enough.
Mummies, red slods, nightwalker. Like,
They're just out to destroy, kill, and eat. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not going to stop to have a conversation with you. It's going to use its abilities to make you edible.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, and its charisma it's got a negative modifier to it, but that just means that it's not gonna be able to understand some social situations. It's not gonna be able to tell who the biggest one in the party is, who's the big threat here, right? Or who the leader is. Like, it's gonna be able to do that, but your subtle stuff, it might have trouble understanding. If you're lying to it, you may get away with it, right?
Yeah.
Not that you necessarily would.
you're still food, whether you lie to it or not. It's still like, I'm still gonna eat you.
But I would say its wisdom is high, And its wisdom is high not because it is wise. It's just, I fucking hate this misnomer of wisdom. It is just hyper aware of its surroundings. With that blind sight of 500 feet, and like it doesn't even have eyes, it just fucking knows.
Yeah.
It's not tremor sense. It's not like true sight or it just fucking sees. It just knows, like it's not even Daredevil. It just sees. It just does. Deal with it. It's magic. And so it knows everything about its surroundings, and that's why its wisdom is so high, because it's going to make perception checks. It's going to understand the basic survival checks and shit like that, because it knows its environment so well.
Yeah.
But I would not say
it has to be able to read what your desires are and try to replicate them as close as possible, right? So it has to have some sort of, not comparison, but I mean emotional intelligence enough
to know what a desire is.
Yes, exactly.
Well, yeah, but it's going to, like, there are going to be things out there. You think about it like this: all of the Sorrow Sworn sit at roughly 6 intelligence, right? And they are very much about what this one instinct, this one feeling is.
Yeah.
For the Balhannoth, that one feeling is desire. It's going to know that better than anything. And I think that if you were to actually get a proper wisdom score too, that's not based on the surrounding environment, but how wise this creature is, it's probably like a 6. I bet the charisma is the best thing about the mental stats here. And so with that, we would say that it's probably more intuitive when it comes to desires, but there are limits. Like you said, it can't do organic material, right? So it can only go so far. It would understand desire the way that you desire an item, or you're envious of somebody else's clothing or something, but it will not understand hunger or lust in other creatures. It'll understand its own hunger, but it doesn't understand because it's not going to replicate organic material to feed you. It's not going to understand lust because it can't replicate other creatures for that kind of desire. So this thing is all going to be about luring you with specifically items, and it's going to know exactly that shit, but it's not going to understand necessarily why, which is interesting to me. Keeping in mind that it will know what your desire is based on the sword that you've seen, but it may not understand that the sword under some it glows blue in the presence of some creature sometimes, but it's not going to know inherently that the scabbard is made out of specifically this kind of leather. It's just not going to get that. It'll just be regular leather. But
it's like it knows what it looks like, not what it feels like, and not what the material is like. Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of the point that I was trying to make. Like, we don't have appraise anymore, but I wish we did. It used to be a skill. And because I think that you could roll a moderate appraisal check and get past this illusion that this gives.
Yeah.
Instead, we get what is investigation is the best that we're going to get. And so it's going to want that's kind of my other thing, as opposed to the Morkoth and the Aboleth with this guy. I think that patience is not a strong suit. When you get close enough, that's good enough hit now. The Morkoth and the Aboleth are going to talk. This thing understands deep speech, but it doesn't speak it. Has no need to, right? So that's
pretty much only uses telepathy to read your desires, right?
And then create them in front of you, right? Like It's not about talking to you. I mean, technically it is rules is written. It has telepathy. It can whisper things to you and you will understand it. But I do think that this is all about also the invisibility thing. It's gonna be invisible before you ever see it. So it's gonna give you the thing, and it's gonna be right beside it, so it can pop up and eat. This is an ambusher, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's kind of a combat tactic, but you think about it from a roleplay perspective too. When it creates this object, it's going to put it within 10 feet of itself. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that kind of brings us to the next point, which is going to be the explorations and clues. It would be like, yes, you're in this area that suddenly, to our point earlier, you're in a safe space to have a, long or short rest or what have you. But if someone takes 10 minutes to investigate the fire, or takes a minute to investigate the weapons that are on the walls, or takes a moment to investigate anything in this area, like, they're going to be able to maybe get past its illusion. But then, to your point, Adam, they're going to be right there, like, oh shit, and then just and then snatch, because they're just like, oh, they found out my ruse, but I'm still right here, you know.
Yeah. By the time they realize their mistake, it's already too late, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They might be able to escape a surprise round, but that's it.
Yeah.
Like that's as far as they're gonna get.
Pretty much. What about you, Kyle? Any other thoughts on exploration and clues?
I mean, honestly, the only thing I could think of for this is you could maybe leave some trappings of whoever their owner is if you encounter this outside of the Shadowfell. Like if you're in the Underdark, or actually pretty much only in the Underdark is where you'll find them in the material plane. So you might leave, I don't know, like house symbols of a drow, or it says that Grimlocks or Mind Flayers might also use them. So you might figure out who or what owns it. But other than that, no, there's no real talking with this thing.
It's true. What about you, Adam?
I'm looking at the warp terrain layer action. I'm going to have to do my digging ahead of time when I'm prepping my session. I'm really going to have to spend some time with this to figure out in what ways the environment is fake. Because it lists, like, there's no writing in the books, and gold items are clearly counterfeit and all that shit. But, like, there's got to be stuff. Do you think hinges work?
Like if there's a door,
no moving pieces.
No moving pieces.
No moving pieces.
Every door is propped open. How long before your players figure that out?
A while.
Yeah.
Remember how dumb we were talking about?
Yeah.
But it's things too, because like you'd walk into a kitchen and the kitchen would be full of stuff sitting on the stove, but there'd be nothing in the pot because we can't make organic material.
Or there will be something in the pot, but it's like made of wood.
It's going to be things that are just a little bit off over and over and over again. And I think that's really interesting and really fun. My big thing, do you think it can teleport and do its vanishing act at the same time? Like, is it teleporting while invisible?
Yeah, because it's only an attack roll that makes it visible again.
Yeah, I would rule that works.
Normally if you cast a spell that makes you drop your invisibility, but this isn't the invisible spell.
And it specifically says just when it is attacked. Yeah.
So when it makes an attack roll is the only time it becomes visible again.
So this is going to follow you around as well, and you should be able to hear the happening through the air, right? The whoosh as air is displaced from a teleportation, and not understand why. Every room that you walk into with the door was completely wide open too, right? And it's marble floor, but it sounds like you're walking on wood for some reason, and nobody figured it out. And then suddenly you're in almost a fun house.
Yeah.
But it's an abandoned fun house without moving parts. How do I set this up to be a deadly trap without moving parts? The terrain looks like wood, but is cloth, and there's spikes underneath. I don't need moving parts.
Here's the thing: is when it says warp terrain, it means literally change the terrain. As long as you are not creating moving parts, magical auras, or living organisms. So, like, let's say they're walking into a cave. That floor is marble. It's not wood.
Right.
That looks like marble.
Right. But okay, yes, you're correct. But I'm sitting here looking at it going, the trick that this thing would pull on you would be to get you to walk into it wants you to fall into let's say a spiked pit, right? It can't use a trap door because moving parts. It can't use a tripwire because that's a moving part. But what it can do is put a very thin layer of something that you will break through. And it might be just intelligent enough to camouflage it with its ability to warp the terrain. So that's why I said, it would look like wood and actually be thin parchment paper or something. It might be able, if the Morkoth can teach it that, it'll learn how to do that, right? And so
in our large scenario of the world.
but the Grimlock, the Mind Flayer, whatever it is, this thing is a guard dog, will teach it these little tricks and traps, but you've got to be aware of the limitations. Not being able to have moving parts is such an issue. And what is a magical aura? Like, I know what that means, but like, does that mean other magic? Like, can I make something just glow? Because that's just an illusion magic. It's not a magical aura the way that a paladin has a magical aura. Can I make light sources? I assume yes.
I want to say yes, but I mean, leave it up to the DM. I mean, fucking man.
Yeah, I would say yeah. I feel like you could make a torch on the wall glow, right? Like, So why
it's
not?
non-living material. That's the only requirement. So
Yeah.
I mean,
I think
fire is a non-living material, and oil is non-living material.
Is oil organic because it's made from?
No. It says non-living
Living.
material.
Gotcha. So you could have corpses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
let's get into combat ideas, because I feel like that's where we are right now.
Yeah.
But I feel like, Adam, you're on a train of thought, so you can start with combat ideas, because I feel like that's where you're going with this.
Like I said, this thing's an ambusher, right?
Yeah.
And I want it to, because it can warp the terrain. Can you imagine? This thing doesn't have eyes, so it doesn't need to like look at you from around the corner. It just needs to know that you're where you are within 500 feet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So but it wants to be close enough to get you, which means that as you're moving through the space, it is teleporting to the next place it thinks you're going to go. Have you ever tried to predict the direction that a fucking player goes? Even with the red herring, they will go the opposite goddamn direction.
100%.
So what I'm going to do with the Balhannoth is I'm going to have it get frustrated and eventually just drop the... You may not get to the end of this warped terrain. Also, the layer action, it can't take the layer action 2 rounds in a row, so warped terrain goes up.
Warped terrain takes 10 minutes. Right, it's not an instantaneous thing.
It's like prepping for you.
But the moment that you use the teleport or vanish layer action, then it drops the warp terrain. So you have to use your legendary actions to do them.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Mm-hmm.
The warp terrain action lasts until the Balhannoth dies or takes this layer action again.
Oh, this layer action again. Not
specifically the same one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so you can follow it around like a fucking haunted Luigi's Mansion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm absolutely 100% going to get you as deep into this thing as possible. Yeah. And it has allies, right?
I'd say so.
No,
I'm going to say no.
No. By allies, I mean the Mind Flayers, the Grimlocks, the things that I'm living with, right?
Like, yeah. Okay,
In our instance, the Morkoth.
But can you imagine it drops the warp terrain and everything goes back to normal and you find yourself surrounded by intellect devourers because it's a mind flayer controlling this thing?
How fun would that be for everybody involved?
I have used a swarm of intellect devourers twice, and both times ended up in a character death, and I am so happy about it. And I would
of course. I hate it.
So that's my big thing is I'm going to prep this guy for the exploratory side of things. I want to do my homework ahead of time to see what false things I can set up to make everything seem just a little bit weird. But my combat is ambush. It's got to be an ambush, right? You drop the illusion and fucking hit. Right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, you pop into visibility, or you drop the warp terrain, or your allies just come out of the woodwork of somewhere that they shouldn't be able to come out of. Right.
Yeah.
Like there would be a door that would be, clearly to a lavatory. However, there's a giant guard room behind there full of fucking kobolds, right? Like whatever it is, because again, it can control the terrain but that means it can do red herrings if someone will teach it.
Yeah. Well, my only additive combat idea was very simple, where it would just use the ability to, when it does panic and wants to go after your folks, it's going to grapple someone and then make itself invisible to everybody else around it.
Yeah.
But the person that you're grappling can definitely see and feel it as being grappled, but you make yourself invisible to everybody else around it. So they have disadvantage to hit you until you strangle this person to death, basically. Or escape with them.
Wasn't that a really creepy episode of Buffy where there was some creature living in the ground that Willow was getting her stomach flayed, but nobody else could see it? They could just see her stomach getting ripped apart slowly.
Yeah, very much so.
Fun.
Yeah.
That was a deep dive for me too.
I like it. What about you, Kyle? Any final thoughts on combat for these guys?
Okay, so I know exactly how I would use these guys. For any cocky spellcaster or rogue that just likes to never put themselves in mortal danger, right? So let's say you have their warp terrain as being like a cave entrance. This thing has 500 feet of blind sight. It doesn't need to have line of sight. It knows exactly how big your party is and where they are. And I mean, like any party, they're going to have the weakest characters at the back. So this thing is going to wait until they all funnel into the cave. And then as soon as they're all inside, this guy is going to grab the last of them, right? And he's going to be on the wall above the door. So unless your fighter and barbarian has like ranged attack, they're not going to be able to do shit. And then it's just going to grab that person, warp away to like on the ceiling above, and then try to like eat whoever they have, and then just make themselves invisible to the most dangerous creature in your party.
Oh my God, Kyle, you just ran across it with the warped terrain, and you're like the invisible and all that shit. Warped terrain, you let them walk into the lair. It's just a series of caverns, whatever. But the moment that the party gets separated, you warp the terrain to make walls between them.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you
Yeah.
don't need to see them. You can sit in a central chamber and know where everyone on the map is as you Scooby-Doo this shit and separate them all out, going invisible and fucking attacking them one at a time.
Yeah. And you don't even need line of sight for where you're teleporting to.
Yeah, this here just became your boogeyman scenario for a level 18 party, because it occurs to me that true sight is not going to get past this warped terrain because it literally warps reality. It doesn't just put up an illusion.
What a fun Halloween episode haunted house monster to make.
Well, I mean, yes, everybody roll up a level 19 character. I'm going to eat 3 of you.
What a great time.
Adam, you're going to have to delay the release of this episode until after Halloween next year, I'm afraid.
Thanks. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Well, I damn well know that I can tell you who on the podcast won't listen to this. Does somebody want to run this scenario for, let's say, Terry, Dave, and James? I know they won't fucking listen to this.
100%. Halloween episode.
All of the above.
Yeah, right?
All the listeners are going to be waiting for a new like special Halloween episode where we 3 as the DMs run a haunted Halloween as the Aboleth, the Morkoth, and the Balhannoth.
That's more than a one shot. That is a Halloween campaign.
We're going to kill some people and I love that.
In the game.
Sorry, yes, in game. All right, so before we wrap up this episode, let's cut to our last ad break.
If you've been inspired by the conversation in this episode, please feel free to reach out and share your creativity and ideas with us and the rest of the community. You can reach us on Facebook and Instagram, or on our subreddit r/itsamimic. Also, if you're feeling particularly generous, please follow and subscribe and leave us positive reviews, likes and comments. Engagement like that help us pop up on search engines and keep this show running.
So do you guys have a favorite of the Tentacle guys that we talked about? Tentacles, by the way, is going to be the name of my fucking Mind Flayer character. The next, like, the superhero. Tentacles.
Tentacles is the triumvirate of the tentacled monsters.
Oh my god.
Do you guys have a favorite?
I would say the Morkoth is my favorite for a nice big bad evil guy, but I am loving the Balhannoth as just like your like random encounter annoyance to have to deal with kind of thing, right? But I don't know.
I'm all over the Aboleth still. The Aboleth is a campaign for me. The Morkoth is a lieutenant or a distraction for a couple of sessions.
Yeah.
The Balhannoth is a really cool set piece. But the Aboleth hates the gods. That's a campaign for me.
Yeah. You like a good, like, you know, morality bender kind of nonsense. And I feel like that's what an Aboleth would do for you.
Yep.
Love that for you.
I am also really against the gods, but I think Morkoth just has a little more flavor to it, and it's a little more varied, and I think it would make a great reoccurring NPC, right? Because it doesn't, the other two are enemies and they're kind of strictly and only enemies, whereas the Morkoth is a little more nuanced and sort of in terms of its.
You could go either way with it. You can either be an evil thing, or it can just be like a weird bartering person that you see every once in a while. Like,
yeah, right. And it's just like it's so fucking out there, and just like it doesn't fit into any world.
But can, because where it lives can go anywhere, right? So I think that's the versatility that a lot of DMs are looking for, is what is a weird thing I can plunk into my campaign without it being too offshoot. And like as offshoot as this thing is, lore-wise, it could potentially do exactly what it is that you're telling it to do. Like,
The other thing I want to say though is, while I think the Aboleth has more story potential and can be an NPC, if it's got an eternity to scheme and to set things in motion, it may not just be out for the kill or for the immediate gratification. So it could be an NPC, but every seasoned player is going to hear about the aquatic tentacle monster with mind control shit and think Aboleth and prepare for Aboleth and find a Morkoth and be like, what the fuck just happened?
what even is this?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I like the Morkoth that much more. I'm probably more likely to use a Morkoth if I get a proper mini for it.
Fair enough.
I have an Aboleth. I
Yeah.
don't have the other two, and I'm eager to get them.
Of course you are.
Gnarly.
Yeah, I actually think the Morkoth would make the coolest mini out of all of them too, because it's got all that shit on their back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Agreed.
Okay, everybody. So that's all for this discussion on Aberrations in 5th edition. Make sure you subscribe or follow and check back regularly to see what inspirations and insights we have for you in the future. Next week, we'll be starting off a conversation that's long overdue on this podcast, feats.
Feats. How exciting.
We don't kink shame. We're getting into
Yeah,
feet.
not FEET, by the way.
Feats. Thanks for listening to another episode of the It's a Mimic podcast. If you'd like to support us, we have a donate button on our website, www.itsamimic.com, a store with some awesome It's a Mimic merch, and a Patreon. This episode and others can also be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and most other podcast apps. Thanks again for listening to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get.
This has been an It's a Mimic production. Please check the show notes for this episode to see links, time codes, and credits, and don't forget to reach out and share your own inspirations.
Yay, we did it!
We did it. That was like a 3-hour episode. It's a good thing
Wow!
we did it early.
I was not expecting that.
No, not for this. But they're all badass set pieces, right?
They're a lot more interesting than I thought they were going to be honest with you.
Yeah. Also, it helps when Kyle and I argue about layers for 20 minutes in the middle of an episode.
It's like, come on, guys.
So Dan's middle name, and I'm not going to out it because I am going to put this on the end of the episode, but his middle name is the same first name as one of our regular mailbag people that kept asking questions for years. And every time we would get a question, I'd be like, is this Dan? Is this Dan? Until Dan started to get like angry about these questions. We would stop recording and he'd be like, who the fuck even asked that? It's in the goddamn fucking, and he would just go off. He'd be like, okay, all right, probably not Dan.
No, maybe he does ask them for himself so that he can get angry at himself. He just needs to let out some rage. Yeah. All right, so we are going to be talking about.
Sorry, can we just?
Yeah. What do you need?
Pause
What do you
for a second.
need, Kyle?
I just realized that the microphone is not what it's supposed to be. So I just want to
Oh, okay.
figure it out.
Well, we're not doing that intro again.
What do you mean it's not what it's supposed to be?
Well, so I've got like Bluetooth headphones, and then I also have a microphone, and both the microphone and speakers are my headphones right now.
Oh, it sounds really good though.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
That's weird. After we just fiddled with it, do you want to try the other one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, at the very least, we can just put it back, right?
True. How do I find it?
If you go into your, like where you can mute yourself in Zoom, if you click the arrow, it'll give you an array of whatever microphones you have available to you for select microphone.
Oh.
Okay, how is that one?
That's a little louder, is what that is. Talk a little bit more. That does sound clearer for me. I don't know if that sounds clear for Adam.
I can't hear. Keep talking.
Kyle, say things.
Every
right
time
now.
we ask Kyle to say something, he's quiet. So
Yeah, I am saying all the things. A lot of things.
it's really bassy, but I wonder if that's just my subwoofer. That might just be on my end. Okay, it's clear for. It's clear.
It does sound clear for me. Yeah.
All right.
Is it
well,
going down or?
No. Just leave it as is. If Megan likes it, we're good.
Okay.
Hey yo.
That's,
Can I put that on a bumper sticker? If Megan likes it, we're okay. I Again, I don't need this kind of power, but thank you.
Need and want are two different things, Megan.
Hey, man, if I could control minds.
Okay, see you next time.